Okay, my name is Chris Denaro, co-chair of the Warner's Pond Task Force, and I'm calling this public meeting to order at 5:01. So I'll take a roll call of all task members present. Why don't we start, Jeff, with you?
Present.
And Whitford present.
Mark Howell, present.
Bruce Curls present.
Bill Cremeza, present.
Chris Denaro present.
Toby Berkman, Consensus Building Institute Facilitator, present.
Rachel Freed, CBI facilitator present. Samiksha Patel.
Present.
You got it.
Kirk Coleman's staff, present.
Celia Kay present.
Paul?
Paul.
And Paul Bowen was present.
Is there anybody else online? Malcolm is in.
Oh, did you get that? Malcolm Bryant, present.
Since we have two Jeffs, I'll say Jeff.
Yes.
Very good.
For the record.
Yeah, Jeff Quick is here.
Oh, good, Jeff.
So we're just missing.
Who else was online? Malcolm?
Malcolm.
Malcolm, Paul, we're
Paul.
missing
Who did, somebody pulled up?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Liz just pulled up.
Liz is in the.
She's walking
Okay,
in.
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. We're missing David, Owen, Vicky,
No?
and
Sven.
Keith and Sven. Yeah. Maybe David and Vicky will join.
Vicky will be here.
She will
said
be
she's
here.
running late. She's
Okay,
in traffic.
Right, okay.
Okay, so our main goals really for tonight are,
No, David Owen is just joining online.
oh, perfect.
It is.
Okay.
Here it is. I missed.
So our main goals for tonight are, we were supposed to hear a presentation from Steve Maddox. We have now postponed that to our next, task force meeting. We just feel it's a better fit and more suitable for his timetable, and so we decided to change that. We also will hear from the dam removal work group. They're looking for feedback, from the task force to help guide their proposals. And we're also gonna take a look at the next steps for the work groups moving forward. Okay. You can see our agenda here on the slide behind me. So we'll open the meeting to public comments at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. And this meeting is being recorded and a video link will be posted to the task force website, within a few days. Toby, want to talk about the agenda?
Yeah, so just as Chris noted, we felt it'd be better to push the fisheries expert to the next meeting. He'd be joining tonight via the car, and that just didn't seem ideal. We definitely want to get you out no later than 8 tonight. Not having the fisheries expert here gives us some more time, so we might even get out a bit early. But we do have, a bunch of important issues that we know we need to discuss and want to make sure that we give them the right amount of time, and y'all can have the discussion that you need to have. So with that, Chris, maybe I'll turn it to you to walk us through the minutes.
Okay, so, minutes of the meeting, everybody should have received them. So do I have a motion to approve the August 13, 2024 minutes?
And just to be clear, we did not receive any suggested edits to those minutes, so they're as.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Liz.
Second.
Second, thank you very much, Mark. So do we have, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
I think you have to roll call.
Oh,
Oh, that's right.
Aye.
okay, I'll just go through my list. Paul,
Yes,
Malcolm,
He already.
He said yes.
Okay. okay, just have that hearing then. Jeff,
I'll abstain as I wasn't present.
okay. Me, yes. Keith is not here. Mark,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes?
Liz.
Yep.
You said David Owen was on?
Yes.
David?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, and
Bruce.
non-voting.
All non-voting.
Yeah, I think I have all the voting members, so it seems to me that, the minutes are approved, so, thank you, they'll be accepted. So, on to public comments.
So we thought, there was a recommendation last time, at our last meeting, that we provide public comments at the beginning as well as, well, at least at the beginning and maybe at the end, and we thought it'd be good to do that, both at the beginning and the end. So we're gonna use the same, guidelines we use at the end, and that is we ask anyone who wants to make a public comment to, again, be respectful, avoid personal, attacks, and keep your comments to no more than 2 minutes. So, is there anybody who wants to make a comment? There's no one here in the room, but anyone online?
Maybe take down the share so we can see.
Do you see anyone? Delia? No?
I didn't see any.
Delia would have it on her
We can
computer.
see it, yeah, on our-
Yeah.
Okay, there's no one there.
Okay.
Okay, so that no one has a comment. All right, good. So we can move on from that then.
There are members of the public in attendance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no one has raised their hand.
Okay, very good. Okay. So why don't we move on then to the update and discussion on, the proposed CPC application for, Giroux Park. So basically, at the last meeting, then when Carrie spoke with us about Giroux and gave us the final update about that, she left the door open to CPC and CPA funds for Giroux Park for recreation. And so currently, there isn't any water access at Giroux Park right now. And so the Recreation Commission is proposing a CPC application, which includes water access. And Paul, as our rep here from the task force from the Recreation Commission, he has a short presentation to explain the CPC application that they would like to put in. And the goal is for us to, as a task force, decide whether we support this. And if so, then Bill and I, as co-chairs, will put together a letter of support from the task force to the Recreation Commission, so that when they present their CPC application, it shows that they're getting support from the Warner's Pond Task Force as well. Okay.
I'd like to say, yeah, absolutely, I agree with Chris. Two things I wanna point out. One is that, we're supporting the idea of access to the pond from the Giroux Park. And, that the iteration of how it's shaped right now in this proposal, my guess, Paul, I don't know, but I know how these processes work. It may change, but we're just affirming, our letter would simply affirm our view that this is an important thing to do. And from what I can gather from all three of our work groups, whether it's, whether we take the dam out, whether we, dredge, or whether we, short-term solutions, all three of them, I think would benefit. I think we all thought that anyway, from having access from Giroux to the water. So that's the gist of what we would like to support. And they're gonna show us a presentation. My guess is, though, that some of those elements may change as they go through their process. So,
Okay.
Paul?
Okay. Toby, if you can put up the slides, I have a few. So just a little background, as Chris mentioned, I am the Recreation Commission's representative on the task force, but for longer than that, I've personally viewed Warner's Pond and Giroux as kind of a combined entity. Not that Warner's Pond doesn't have its own challenges and we have to focus on that. But in terms of recreational enhancements, improvements, Giroux certainly, to me, has been a piece of that puzzle. Not the only piece, because I think there are other recreational improvements that we could do, but I want to talk about the Giroux piece today. Next slide, please. And also, Kerry gave the update on where we are. So where we are right now is the construction of the basic park. You've all been there, is almost complete. I haven't been out there in a week, so maybe it is complete, but it's almost complete. The final touches are being put on the basic park, which is the pavilion, the basic landscaping, the trails, the restroom, parking area, and a few other things. And a new sign, which is a little underwhelming. I almost missed it, but that's a whole nother issue. So just the teeny history. Of course, the Giroux property was purchased by the town in 2018, and phase one, as we call it, is almost complete. Funding from the town budget and the CPA funds through the CPC have funded both the acquisition and the development of the park. There've been two CPC projects in the past totaling $700,000. The first one in FY19 of $500,000, and then a couple of $100,000 to get phase one done in the FY20. So there has been CPC investment. Several of the initial concepts in the conceptual plan, and I'll show a little bit of that, were not included in the prior funding. There was envision that some of the things I'll talk about today would be in the plan, but the way that the construction, the budgets worked out, they just weren't in there and they weren't budgeted yet for Giroux. So the CPC application is basically to address those aspects that were envisioned early when the plan was when the park was acquired, when the property was acquired. Next slide, please. So, Bill, to your point, the application is due on Friday, so I don't think this is going to change unless the CPC itself has some comments, recommendations. So basically, the project has two elements, and I have to say there's been some discussions with the Public Works, DPW, over the last couple of weeks. There was a concern from the town manager, DPW, that any further enhancements of the park would put an additional burden on maintenance of the park. So as you'll see in here, item number 2, Alan Cathcart was on board in adding that. Let me get to that in a minute. But the basic enhancements that we talked about, that Bill talked about, was water access through a boat dock launch and a fishing pier structure. And when I've looked into this, there's several different vendors, and this combination of an ADA compliant boat dock, meaning canoe, kayak launch, and a fishing pier is quite feasible, and there are vendors that supply that. So we're not constructing anything from scratch. Presumably we'd be purchasing a structure that would be customized, and I'll get to that customization in a minute. In addition, there would be an ADA accessible and inclusive natural playground in the area. So that's item number 2. And then there'll be additional access paths and landscape improvements associated with the water access and the playground features. So there would have to be some grading and trails and some other work on the park. All of that has to be designed. It has to be engineered, and cost estimates have to be developed. And that's as far as this project is going. This project does not include the actual construction. This is basically to come up with a design for those additions and come up with cost estimates, so that in the actual construction phase, we go to whatever funding is available, whether it's CPC or town or some combination. We know exactly what we're talking about. So this is basically the setup for a future enhancements. And if you ask me about timing of this, given the various project funding cycles, it's unlikely that anything would actually be at the park until roughly 2027, 2028. So we're a few years away from actually something appearing at the park. That's the reality of the various cycles here. And it's pretty normal for CPC projects. For example, if this project is funded, the money would not even be available until the fall of next year, given that town meeting is probably going to be in June now, and that's when the warrant article appears and all the CPC projects are voted on, and then the funding is released probably in the fall of next year. So I just want to give you an idea about the timing. The other newly added piece of this is creation of a comprehensive O&M and capital replacement plan and budget for the park based on the already built features and the alternatives and the new features. I think DPW and the town would like to know exactly what it's going to take and to maintain both the park and the new enhancements. So this is something that's going to be developed as part of this project as well. Next slide. The detailed scope is that there'll be an RFP developed, there'll be a consultant hired. The consultant will develop several different design concepts for the various features. And there will be, importantly, there are going to be probably 2 or 3 public meetings. So I think the consultant will facilitate those. We want public input into exactly what that boat launch would have, what that fishing pier would have, and what the playground would have. And based on those public meetings, the alternatives are going to come out of the public. We're not entering this with any preconceived notion exactly what these are going to be. We're going to seek public input and make sure that we get a lot of buy-in to what's actually finally designed. And then the consultant will develop this O&M and capital replacement plan. To Bill's earlier point, we believe that regardless of what alternatives are decided on this task force, ranging from no action to dam removal to various parts of dredging, that's independent of the need for these enhancements in the park, and they will all these enhancements that Giroux will benefit the recreational improvements for any alternative that we decide in this task force for the pond itself. Next slide. So there are a couple of really nice illustrations from the alternatives analysis report, which give you some idea of to my previous point about the independence of the alternatives and the benefits of these enhancements. So you have in the left side, there's an aerial view and an aerial depiction of the park, and this is where the pond remains a full pond that is dredged and filling alternative, and so you see there where there'd be the boat launch versus where the pond is and where the pond would be, and then the playground would be on the upper left. The next slide shows what EA's view would be of the result of the dam removal. So the dam removal would give you, and I think we've talked about this, a smaller pond, but there'd be a deep hole by Giroux, and you'd still have the boat launch right there in the deeper part of the pond, leading to both upstream and downstream access to the Neshoba Creek if the dam would be removed. So this is just an illustration which shows the independence of what happens at Giroux and the benefits it would play into any alternative for the pond. Next slide. I just have a couple of final slides from both the alternatives analysis and from some of the earlier Giroux discussion. So here you see sort of this is the 14,000 foot. This is the alternative dredging plan. But whether it's this one or a larger plan, the initial plan, 35,000 cubic yards, or a different plan, it would leave this deeper hole by Giroux, which was this new recreational dock was envisioned as part of the alternatives analysis. And indeed, it was mentioned in the alternatives analysis report as one of the recreational enhancements. Next slide. I just have a couple of slides here which came from just to show there's some history in this whole concept. Back in November 2018, when Giroux, the conceptual plan was first presented to the town, you can see that the dock and the playground were in there. They're not in there now, so this is kind of catching up on those earlier features, which were envisioned as being part of the whole park. So that's what we're trying to fill in the gaps here with this application. And the next slide shows a similar, well, it's actually from the design drawings for the recreational improvement area. This also shows the playground area and it also shows the dock. So these pieces were sort of always in there. There's nothing that the Recreation Commission is making up. We're just catching up a bit. And then the last slide is the final depict. Whoops, that is the end of the slideshow. There's no other slide there. So there, yeah. So the fishing pier, fishing dock, the playground, we believe would be benefits to the Pond Giroux system, would benefit to the community, would be the benefit to people entering from the rail trail. I think it would just be a cool thing. So that's what we're proposing to the CPC.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
So we can open up for questions and discussion. I do want to just, have our co-chairs, do you want to just reiterate kind of what the ask is?
Yeah, I can do that. if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
What I would love to have us do is have I would like to entertain a motion that the chairs of the task force, Chris and I, write a letter of support for the Recreation Commission application to create a plan that allows access to the pond from the park. It's that simple. And then there's a lot more they could work, that needs to be worked out, et cetera, et cetera. That's the only thing that's what I hope we can do. So can we open up for discussion or about that? Thoughts?
Hi, the only question I had, there was I think Dan Stapleton sent in an analysis, and I know you and I talked about it just quickly. That does put a little bit into question where the waterway might end up, given the new bathymetry. I think we looked at it all together at our last meeting of the dam removal group. That the current bathymetry may push the water away from Jerome more than we would like it to have access from Jerome. And so my question is, how do we get our arms around that analysis?
Yeah, I can
And so-
understand. My opinion would be, that wouldn't be our issue. There's still gonna be a deep hole, whether they have a longer run to the deep hole or not. That's up to the Recreation Commission and their plan as they go through it. Because there still will be a hole no matter what they do. Now they may decide, and you still want access from Giroux to the water, no matter what happens.
Even if
over
it's
there.
500 feet.
I would think you want access. Don't you think so?
I do, but it.
So then, and so
yeah,
that's why we're not putting in, that's why
Okay.
we're not saying we're just saying,
Some
create
sort
a
of
plan that allows access to the pond.
Okay. Then I'm good.
Jeff, you look skeptical. What do you think?
Yeah, it feels a little cart before the horse to me, or too many balls in the air. We're grappling with a lot of issues here. I hear Paul's, and I get the sense that funding would need to be allocated till the end of next year. This would be for planning anyways. Our work should be done by then. But I guess, we've seen already in this conversation, folks casting back 4 or 5 years to a document that makes reference to something that they think argues for one outcome over another. And so, Paul, I appreciate your and the Recreation Commission's writing access to the water. Bill, just because it's complicated, you say access to the pond, and that's.
We just say,
people
we can say
minds
water,
to
yeah.
water.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm just pointing out that fraud element of.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
We're
That's a
not
very good point.
forecasting or.
Yeah.
Predetermining some outcome or
That's a good point.
favoring one outcome. We are allocating funds to plan for either eventuality or any eventuality. So if we were to write a letter, we would want that to make it clear.
I think
Anything
that
should
makes
be
perfect sense.
Contingent on the work of this group and not directed in terms of.
Right. Yeah, I think all I would say is access to the water.
Yeah, and
Because-
to add to that, I think to support the idea that recreation is going to add more recreation at Giroux that's connected to connections to water, whatever that may be, and just generally recreation. I think we can support that there.
I wouldn't even want to go that far. I wouldn't want us to go that far. Let's, outside of our purview, for us,
Yeah.
it's, where our areas, we're just asking them to allows access to the water from the
Okay,
park.
okay,
You know what I mean?
I hear
Just
you.
Keep it that simple.
okay.
One other element comes to mind in that sort of, we'll show when we get to our mini presentation, all kinds of dots. But a question arises of how many boat access points do we need? And would a boat access at Giroux supersede ComEd? And ComEd could be reformed to something else. Would the neighbors there say, well, this is my boat access, I want to enhance boat access? Now you're investing in 2 boat accesses, so does Giroux need to have a boat access? Would it be a fishing dock / skating point or something?
Mhm.
So all
Yeah.
we're saying is they have access to the water.
Right.
And it could be
Without
just because of the deep.
articulated
pond,
uses.
maybe
Yeah,
the
well,
deep-
I agree. We
Good
shouldn't,
one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna sound ridiculous. It could be just a matter of a trail going down to the water. Right now, there's nothing going
Yeah,
down to the
right.
water.
So
and
it's not a
blocked.
boat launch, we're just.
All we're saying
access.
is access to the
Yeah, I
water.
think that's the big
Details
difference.
TBD.
Details to
Yeah.
be
Right.
determined.
David, I'm sorry. go ahead.
Sorry, final question
of
for
course.
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Julia. Recreation Commission, we're all in the spirit of working together, and that's great. Recreation Commission making plans for a facility over conservation land adjacent to Giroux. How does that work?
Yeah, that's an interesting, sort of thought about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think, it's going to come through, NRC anyway, through the permitting process. And
Yeah.
there probably will have, the NRC, will have to sign off on the application as, there are two property owners here.
Yeah.
So, so I think it can be handled and has to be recognized, but I think there's.
Yeah, in other words, yeah, the commission has to sign off on any plan that comes through, and if it's in any way doesn't meet the environmental standards, then they would.
So it sounds like there's a path forward. Okay, yeah, that's good.
I mean, that's a decision.
NRC has to make
It's
it.
an NRC decision, yeah.
So,
So yeah, I see some hands online, they've been up for a while, could we maybe go to David, and then Paul, and we'll come back to folks in the room? David, go ahead.
Yes, I guess my input is in terms of access, sounds like you're kind of dialing back on what we're specifying in terms of access, and I think there's different implications. If the pond is likely to continue to have water's edge access from Commonwealth as it is today, well, then I don't have any input, as a representative of the scouting in Concord, because we would still have that crucial access for a trailer with canoes. But if things are going to change, such as it shows the dam removal, and that you wouldn't be able to get access from that Commonwealth launch point, then I think it is critically important to the scouting constituents that we be more specific, that a Giroux access enable not just get a car down to the water's edge, but a pickup truck with a trailer of 8 canoes.
My responding, David, I think that's a fine thing to discuss. Again, outside the scope of what we're asking for at the moment, but when they come to the actual planning, we'll know more about what's going to happen with that Commonwealth Avenue access. Whether that's unable to use that for that, or whether you need to have to talk to the Recreation Commission about making sure that the canoes are able to get down to from that property. So,
but I guess I'm wondering if you could put maybe some kind of clause or thing in there that, the requests change if that no longer is an access point. It puts more burden on the requirements for Giroux Park if that access point. Right now, we're silent on it, that there's no change to other access points around there. I think it is material that if other access points change, that the requirements for the Giroux Park are incumbent on them.
Paul has any comments?
Yeah, Paul, do you want to check in on this? And I have some thoughts as well. but-
Yeah, no, I think you all raise really good points. Vicky's point about water level, and other points, I have to come back to the timing on this. So this project and the design would need more information, but this is not going to happen till the spring of 2026. The funding would be available towards the end of next year. So we have time to understand more about water levels and about what the task force decides. But putting all that aside, the design here was to think of Giroux and people at Giroux and enhancing the enjoyment of Giroux. To have water access from Giroux would enhance the enjoyment of that park. Whether or not there's 1 or 2 or 3 other water access points, I mean, you could throw a canoe into the pond, probably not safely from a lot of points. And if Commonwealth remains, it still would enhance the enjoyment of people at the park if they could, park a car, get a canoe down to the water's edge, put the kayak in, a canoe in, come back, have a picnic, jump in the playground. It just enhances the park itself. So I think we need to think about the other things in the pond, but think about Giroux as a recreational enhancement unto itself. So, but all these are really good points you're making.
Thanks, Paul. Let's get some of the other comments in the room, and yeah, we can go from there.
So I like to be the devil's advocate, because I'm always thinking about sort of things. I love the idea of water access, and I support it wherever we can get it, but I think about the politicizing a task force, right, that has a very specific task. Right, that's looking at very specific things around Waters Pond. And is this in the scope of it? Is it not in the scope of it? And then the fact of how does it really have an effect? Have other task force been asked for these kinds of letters of support and supporting things in the past? Have they not done it? And I really sort of start looking at all of that because it sort of politicizes what we do. In some ways, because there are other people looking for funds. There are other people doing funds. I mean, I think it's a great idea and I love the idea. As a non-voting member, I get to say, I don't have anything to do with it, but but all the folks who live here
Right.
have to deal with those kinds of repercussions and have to deal with those kinds of actions. So when you start to think about it, it's like, does it fit within our scope? Right, the scope of the task force, because that's really what we, took our oaths for. And or does it sort of start to politicize even more a very political hot button item within town for all of those who sort of live here and have to deal with that?
That's something that folks who kind of have experience in town politics can comment on? Mark, yes?
It is a very good question to ask in terms of how well it fits into our scope. And it kind of dovetails to a couple of thoughts that I have about this. One is, I think looking at the history of the Giroux Park, we have maybe gotten out, acted without as much public process as we could have. I would point out that the CPC process is an annual process. There's an allocation of recreation funds that comes up as part of the Community Preservation Committee grants every year. And I think we're at this stage, I guess it was Jeff who said it, we may be getting out a little ahead of the play in the sense that we're adding a potential project on top of something that hasn't really been decided or even recommended in terms of where we go. So I worry about that sort of thing. I also didn't see a dollar amount, and if I were sitting on the CPC evaluating applications, I would probably want to see more clarity than this about exactly what are you talking about. And whenever you're doing an application that says, well, if the task force recommends dredging, then it's this, but if the task force recommends dam removal, then it's that, and if the task force recommends something else, then it's something else. And now they're supposed to weigh that by hopefully a criteria of priority against whatever else they get in terms of applications by this Friday. That all seems a little unnecessarily quick to me. It doesn't seem quite as deliberate, because I think that the community definitely heard that there's a lot of people that are interested in water access, and definitely heard that there were representations made when Giroux was being developed, and I think we all understand that. And I think it's great to be saying there's a path to get that. I'm just not so sure that right now is the time to ask for that.
Can I say something first? First of all, I didn't mean to hide the dollars, but it's a $90,000 proposal for those various pieces. Secondly, letters of support, and Ann Clifford here sits on the CPC, as do I. And Ann, you got to make sure I recuse myself from CPC deliberations, which I will. Letters of support are very common from both the public and by other town entities. It's not uncommon. I don't think it's political at all. As far as the scope, I'm on this task force because recreational improvements were always in the scope of this task force. It wasn't just restore the pond. If it was, you wouldn't need any recreational. It's always been there as one of the goals. It's there as one of our criteria. So it's certainly within the scope to look at recreational enhancements. And as far as timing, Mark, I think independent of what we decide here, we made the point, and I think it's pretty clear that water access would benefit any and all alternatives. So,
and I'm presuming just not to engage in too much back and forth, but if it's going forward this Friday, the Recreation Commission's already presumably voted to put in an application for this. So there's going to be an application regardless of what we do. Is that correct, Paul?
That's correct. And CPC will deliberate and decide whether this should be funded or something else should be funded.
Right.
And
just-
you want to
Can I
come in,
just-
Chris? Yeah, please, go ahead.
And I understand what you're saying, and I'm just going back to what Carrie had presented to us as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
And she spoke very clearly about the fact that, like the more to work as a team, the more entities involved, the more importance and the more
Mhm.
weight that carries. So with that in mind, I was thinking, it would make sense for us as a task force to, support what's going on at Jerome.
I just thought of a potential way of working this. Without supporting the specific plan, if that's a concern, we could say, we would like the CPC, the Kenya Committee, to know that the task force does believe that there should be access to the water from Giroux Park, or from Giroux Park to the water. And just let it go at that. That's a clear statement. That's what we believe in. And then they can present the plan without having to work out the details of it. That's something I think we've all have been thinking all along. Does that make any sense?
Do you want to chime in, Anne, please? Yeah.
Yeah, just to sort of reiterate what I've been hearing around the table, I guess I've also just questioning the process and whether the NRC has reviewed this, and if this task force is actually a subset of the NRC, is it proper process-wise for this body to make a decision before they do theirs? That's.
As a member, I think it's, we're gonna be making a lot of recommendations to the Natural Resources Commission, which they may
To them.
reject.
Right.
Which they may
to them,
reject.
But not to.
But all we're doing in this case is we're simply saying that we believe there should be an access to the water from Giroux Park. That's all we're saying.
Should we be making that recommendation to the NRC?
No, we're making that recommendation. No, we're just sending a letter of clarification to where we stand with
I
the.
would agree with that. I mean, I know any committee is gonna be established by somebody. And I don't think that they are asking their appointing authority if they were gonna write a letter of support. And also, Recreation Commission has requested a letter of support from NRC that we'll be talking about tomorrow. And we have a meeting tomorrow night. It could be brought up. That the task force is considering this so that the NRC has the opportunity to.
Yeah, they
provide
may or may come.
Input.
Yeah, that's right.
And maybe that would sort of address any concerns around that.
Right.
And
Mhm.
just since I also work with CPC, the deadline for support is until mid-November, so this doesn't need to be decided tonight.
I think that's,
Right.
a really good point, but we do have a lot of things going on. And to keep bringing up an issue, if we can decide on it now, I think we're ahead of the game, instead of bringing it again next meeting.
I'm sorry, Anne, did you say the deadline was November?
She said,
The application deadline is this Friday, but the
This Friday,
letters.
right.
but
Right,
the
okay.
de-
Right,
the
right.
letters Isn't till mid-November.
Right, okay.
Yeah. David, go ahead. You had your hand up for a while.
Right.
muted, David.
You're muted, yeah.
Maybe I'm not catching it all, but it sounds to me like, Paul, you're saying is that Giroux Park and what we're talking about here is in isolation, not relative to what else may be going on in terms of drawdown or not. And I'm concerned that, as the task force just saying, hey, we just say we need water access, and it's just not taking into account the very real possibility that a long-standing type of access may disappear. And if Giroux Park doesn't take, or the Recreation Commission doesn't take that into account, that in their design, they just say, okay, well, here's a path that, down to a dock, that people can hoist a canoe over their head and carry it down there. I don't think we've done our job as a task force. It just sounds like we're perpetuating two silos of here's Giroux Park and here's the pond.
No, I think you're misunderstanding me. I think I'm saying quite the opposite, that Giroux is part of the whole system here. And we have to, the Recreation Commission and whoever's designing this has to keep their eye on what's going to happen on the pond for that design to be effective.
Right. Great. But then I think there's a proposal on the table that our recommendation for the task force is just simply to say, hey, there should be water access. And I just do think it's more nuanced than that. And we as the task force are more aware of that than anyone else, because we know that the dam could be removed and that access on Commonwealth Avenue could disappear. And then that in turn changes what the needs are for Giroux Park.
Right.
You know, there's gonna be a couple of public meetings though, David, that what I understand the Recreation Commission is gonna be holding. So I would think those things could be worked out.
Yeah, but why can't, okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that means that the Concord Scout House and the scouting community now needs to apply their requirements through the public meetings when they occur. Is that rather than here through the task force?
So maybe, I mean, I want to chime in on this. I see Mark's hand as well. I think we as a task force are going to make comprehensive recommendations. I think we've heard in all our communications with you all at the outset, we did private interviews, just how important kind of a holistic approach is that takes into account recreation, the whole ponds, Giroux, the rail trail, right? That's, I think, been a clear message that we've heard from most, if not every task force member in our phone conversation. So I think there's no doubt in my mind that when we come out with our recommendations, it's going to include more specificity on what kind of water access we need. You know, David, you know, you'll have an opportunity when we're shaping those recommendations to make sure that we address those concerns about scout access, whether that we learn that ComAv is going to still be able to serve its purpose or not, and then we can make a recommendation about with more specificity about what water access needs to look like for Giroux. That's all still on the table. I think the question for our purposes is, do we want to support this specific application, right? Write a letter of support that is phrased in the way that Bill put forward, with the idea that that is not foreclosing any of those future possibilities of what we could recommend. I think, Bill, you've been trying to craft language that does that. I think Paul's been doing the same thing. I think that's a question for you all to decide.
So I have a specific suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think from a good public process perspective, this is the first meeting that we've talked about this idea at all. And so now everybody's on notice that it's a thing. And you know, that we do, this task force and specifically is built of a lot of people who are representative and supposed to represent a lot of interests. And I think it's a little unfair to people that are representing those interests to, you know, ask them to learn about something and then take a position right away when they may need to deliberate a little bit more. Given the information that Ann's provided, that the letters are not due until November, I would like to suggest that what we do is we include for distribution the application that the rec commission is going to do on Friday, distribute that, and if Bill or the chairs want to create a letter draft, also that, and then put on a next agenda, or even, you know, whatever fits in before the application deadline, the opportunity to come back and say, here's the letter we'd be sending. This is the application that it's meant to support. Do we have enough? And that gives, I think, everybody a chance to think about it, which, you know, is orderly and timely for what's being done. So that would be my suggestion about how to go forward.
Okay.
Reactions on that from others? Looking at folks online and the room, I see nods. I don't think we need to do a vote on that.
No need for a vote.
We're happy to.
Makes a lot of sense. I think
Okay.
that's fair.
Okay.
Great. So.
Can you say again what was decided? So the idea would be to put on a future agenda, a discussion about a letter of support, which we would have as a draft, along with the application material, you know, whatever the rec commission wants to provide in support of it. So we know what the application looks like, what's in it, what we were planning to say, and have an opportunity to just vote
vote a letter or modify the letter.
Sure.
That's-
Friday, so it should be available for the meeting.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll see the application.
Yeah, and then we'll write a
Yeah,
draft letter.
and we can write a letter. Okay,
All right,
great.
Right.
All right, thanks, folks.
Yeah, so
Um,
I think that
yeah.
if the, you know, if the chairs
Yeah.
wanna take the application, write a draft and.
Let you see it, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's
Yeah.
approve or not.
Great,
approve.
well,
Yeah, that sounds
We
good.
might likely put this on the next meeting
Sure,
agenda.
that sounds
We'll-
fine.
we'll take a
Sounds
look at our timeline, but
Yeah.
great.
Good.
Okay, all right, well, thanks all. Thank you so much, Paul, for bringing this to us. To our co-chairs for the suggestions and all of you for your comments. So we're gonna move to the next item on our agenda, and great, so we wanted to, so the next item on the agenda is the dam removal work group discussion. You all may recall at the last meeting, we discussed the dam removal group, feeling like they were ready to share something with the task force. We had a chance to check in with them between meetings, and they said, look, we're not, well, you can say more, but we're not quite ready to do a proposal, but we do have some important questions or threshold questions where we feel like we really would benefit from some input from the larger task force to help us decide how to move forward. So we wanted to give them some time to share their progress, put some questions to the group, and hopefully get some helpful guidance. So I'm gonna turn it over to you all at this point. I don't know who,
Well,
who's
first
gonna,
up was Sven.
oh, okay. Oops.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Version of this,
Okay.
so maybe of the intermediate version. Could I, you made a co-host or somehow able to share my screen?
You have the Sven's version.
No.
I have this, yeah, I have this.
Wow.
Sven's.
That's great.
Ben sent you all one?
No, this is the one that we had talked about together. We need to put it up. Right, this is on the board. Hold on, where's Sven's screen?
So you people have been working.
And Jeff, if you want to email a presentation to me, I can get it up. I don't know if you're.
I have a bunch of like.
Okay,
images
great.
that I'm gonna click through, I'm sorry. Not in the slide format. The bird, I click on share, like, shows HTTP with this.
So you need to make that off.
Yeah, sure. That'd be easier. if I did it with you. This is just this. Just connecting those and adding that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, this is you.
Well, here, let me put up this. And you can tell me.
Is it the right way for you guys, or do you want it the other way?
Probably the other way.
I can use these.
Here, you know, I'm gonna try to be super tech savvy here and take a photo and share it. with people online.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's the Sven scheme.
So. We'll jump in and we'll maybe refer to the graphic here and, Vicky,
Oh, right
Liz,
on.
Malcolm, jump in at any point. We had thought tonight we'd prepare, and we're going to prepare three versions, sort of of a dam removal scenario. Or three scenarios. One is dam removal with very simple, sort of recreational investments. The second is, greater investment, kind of maximal investment that we think is reasonable and desirable. And the third would be that maximal recreational investment with some supplemental dredging to encourage the channel and ensure that we have sort of a usable, the best outcome for the deep pond. So one of you is going to speak on scenario 3, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So in the slide here, this is Google Earth underlay with my effort to freehand reproduce the wetland conditions sketched in the alternatives analysis. So the darker green predominantly on the west side there is mapped as existing wetlands in the alternatives analysis, and the lighter green is new wetlands that would emerge on exposed soil. Or in, shallow water. Then we have the channels, the darker blue on the left is symbolized as existing channel, the lighter blue as restored channel. And then at the top, the deep pool at the top. So just sort of the vegetation communities, so. We would expect some drying on the far west side, which is now kind of shrub swamp, red maple, sparse red maple, I wouldn't call it a red maple swamp. To slightly drier conditions, maybe a little more woody out there, maybe a little more red maple on this west side, southwestern corner of the pond. But the rest of the wetland would, kind of the cattail marsh now would become sort of maybe a little bit more shrub swamp that's a little drier as the water level drops. So this is, again, more the vegetation on this west side that's in the darker green. And then the lighter green would be like the vegetation we see today. I would forecast, like we see today south of the cornfields. For those of us who took a walk out on the west side, we looked south and over towards Wright Road, and there's a mix of cattails, sedges, grasses, our native grassland species, some non-native grasslands, wet meadow species, but that's to be expected sort of in the lighter green.
Jeff, do you think that in this sort of scenario, both of those existing channels would still continue to exist, or would one of them?
That's a question.
That's a question.
Yeah.
So we have a few questions, which
Yeah.
Liz is gonna represent. There's a few questions that I think are still unanswered.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's part of what, it's like, you're gonna go on the list of how do we really get answers to some of these?
And just from, I may have missed this when you were saying it, Jeff, and I think I did miss it. The dark green you're saying would become, it still isn't woodland. It's still marsh. It's still a sort of a wetland of sorts.
Yeah, so the EA maps this as existing wetland, and it's a variety of depths, I think.
Right.
So my sense is that what's further west over towards the Wright Road
Yep.
is slightly higher elevation. I walked over there and I knocked on the door and I went in somebody's backyard and had a chat, took some photographs. So it's a nice sort of shrub swamp with some 20, 30 foot tall red maples, which is natural native for that setting.
But if the
I think
water
as the
goes down-
water goes down, the soil will naturally tend to be a little drier. It'll be seasonally inundated, not regularly inundated, which would tend to move it more towards a red maple swamp, and sort of the woody species would be able to compete better there.
Okay.
But then what we're seeing south of the cornfields right now, like inside of that dark blue channel loop there, to my eye, that is all herbaceous right now. There's very little woody vegetation out there now. As that becomes slightly drier, you tend to get some more woody wetland plants, buttonbush, dogwoods, things like that. And then the lower elevation, and again, this is not sort of exactly an elevation gradient, but it hints at it. That would be that more herbaceous, wet meadow vegetation or shallow marsh vegetation. So I have a couple photographs from my ramblings. If I can. Yeah, this is Fort Meadow Brook, so, Fort Meadow. Yeah, Fort Meadow Brook, if you go over towards, Route 2. And, look south, this is kind of Route 2 at my back. Looking south into the wetlands around Fort Meadow Brook, so you've got purple loosestrife. We've talked about this fact that this invasive is kind of pervasive on the landscape, but thanks to the release of Galaricella beetles, it's been suppressed, so it's just sort of present, but not making infestation. This darker green out here is cattail, and in the mid-range, you've got a variety of sedges and other things. So, and this, some decent sized stream channel. Some other looks at Fort Meadow Brook running through its wetland. So this is what sort of the body of the current pond, you might suspect would become with a decent channel. This is Neshoba Brook to the west of the cornfields. You can see the cornfields in the background here in the upper right. And it's a decent sized channel. So the question of the width of the channel, the volume of water coming through there, of course, that's seasonal. is a set of questions we have, part of the set of questions we have, but it's not a trickle, right? It's not a teeny little
Mm.
channel. This was in, that's into this was July,
Mhm.
so again, it's not like high water. And then, again, another shot of Fort Middle Brook with this piney slope, pine oak slope. In the foreground to the right here, and this is what I would envision the channel looking like as it comes past Scout Island. Those of us who were able to get over to Scout Island saw there was sort of an access on the northwest side. And it looked like this kind of sloping down somewhat steeply to this, to the water's edge, and you'll see with our recreational amenities, we would want to work with David and his team to support access to Scout Island. So getting to amenities, this is what we came up with roughly for initial proposal of locations and a variety of uses. Any dock could be used for any variety of things. But we have at Giroux, mostly in the location Paul showed in his maps, sort of a boat, skating, fishing dock, some sort of access out onto the water. I'll get back to skating in a second. The northwest corner of Scout Island, some sort of either a dock, or if Scouts did not want to invest in and advertise access with sort of a facility, then that could just be, we make sure that there's suitable sandy access there, or just the ability to hop out of the canoe and get up onto the island. Over on Commonwealth Avenue, access point, access for boats, wildlife viewing, potentially a fishing dock there. And down at the current dam location, if safe access could be designed there, another access point to the flowing river.
And I think part of what we talked about with the Commonwealth Avenue one is that is the flattest access point. And so when we talk about access for all and all ages and also socioeconomic, part of our Envision Concord, that's the one most likely to be able to get a handicap launch of a boat into waterway.
Where's that from from the Commonwealth Avenue site?
Yeah, because that's a flat parking lot,
Yeah.
flat
But
boat
yeah.
launch
Yeah.
potential. Obviously the waterway goes down 3 to 5 feet, there's some grading in there, but it's still less than what we currently have at Giroux, which is already quite a steep slope, and then another, 3 to 5 feet might be pretty, a lot of gymnastics might have to happen to
Okay.
get a real accessible boat launch.
Yeah.
40 steps or something.
Mhm, mhm.
And David's mention of their need for access with a boat trailer and 8 canoes and a bunch of scouts and parents, the day we saw anyways, that's an operation, right? So just as mentioning that reminds me, and it makes me appreciate they need
Commonwealth
adequate-
is important.
adequate access.
Commonwealth Avenue, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
important.
Just some examples of potential things, and these are just ideas, just a pinboard. This is a wildlife viewing platform, at
Great
the
Meadows?
US Fish and Wildlife Service Weird Hill.
So Great Meadows
headquarters.
has.
Great Meadows,
that
Great
too.
Meadows, right, and there's a very similar one at the Mudson Road access point of Great Meadows. These are just screen grabs off the internet, sort of a floating dock. And the idea of a floating dock also jumps past the idea of needing an improved beach, if you could go off and if folks wanted access to open water in the deep pool. Could you have sort of a floating dock type thing? Example of accessible canoe kayak access that could be associated with that type of dock. And then a lot of us have expressed an interest in skating access to the water, whatever remains there. Again, that deep pool will be 4.5 or 5 acres. That's what did that calculate? I don't know, it's like 10 hockey rinks or something like that.
Is that about the size of Macomb Pond? Or is Macomb
Bigger than Macomb.
bigger than Macomb? All right.
I think the Macomb is 3 acres.
3
I'll
acres.
look at it right now.
Okay.
So, despite the way we know the climate is going, hopefully we'll still be able to skate out there once in a while, and having some modest support amenities for that. Nothing grand, but beyond just strap on your skates and walk, go out onto the ice. This is a very simple example of, just a place to sit and put your skates on, put some food down, And then, this is not a wintertime photograph, but a photo I took near the beach of, just some safety, resources for folks who are out using the water. In the case of skating, obviously skating on open water is a little dicey at times. So just having something like a simple throw road could be helpful for skaters.
So Jeff, I'm sorry, that was all, the ice skating was off of the Giroux Park access?
Yeah, I mean, it could be integrated to any of these things. I think once you get on the flowing channel, as someone
That's
who
what I was
grew up
thinking.
skating on the Scannick
Right.
River,
You wanna be doing that,
you need it to be nice and cold, so I would guess that would be up at Giroux.
We need it the deep portion.
So then trails, this is a little bit noisy and on that small screen, it's a little hard to see, but that kind of the pinkish purple color are existing trails. Through Freeman, east, northeast and north. Lost Brook Road sidewalk and the little path at the southeast there through Brookside Village. Then on the west side of Neshoba Brook, up in the northwest corner here, is a path, an existing path across town conservation land north of Wright Road, goes off of the cul-de-sac at the end of Wright Road, right along Neshoba Brook, and it's beautiful. And then this concept of a trail that would go around the whole wetland system has, generated a lot of conversation in our group and interest. You could, potentially utilize the edge of the cornfields, sort of the walk that many of us took on the various tours. In red here are, proposed new trails. There are some existing kind of farm road access or whatever on the edge of the cornfield that could be improved. Yellow I've sketched in here as a boardwalk. A surface trail could just go around this way, or you could come up Bruce Freeman and go right down the existing farm road, straight down the center of the cornfields. Then the idea of making a complete loop is really attractive. You would have to cross quite a stretch of wetland here. Sort of at the southwest corner, so that's sketched in yellow again as a needed boardwalk. And then this peninsula down here is town-owned land. And this block of forest is not part of that town conservation land, but the town conservation land does sort of skirt the wetland edge down here. So would it be potential to add just a surface trail down there, loops back to Losbrook Road? Now you can make, really nice long walk around the whole pond. So that's one set of ideas around a trail. One other thing that I think would be really appreciated as part of this greater trail network is to recreate access at, kind of surface level from Bruce Freeman just before the bridge rises up over Route 2 across Neshoba Brook to this little field here, and then there's an existing bridge at this point that goes from the edge of Route 2 down to those Wright Road trails, and there are other trails that go over this way along Fort Mill Brook, which are beautiful also. Right now, this is a photograph of, again, a concept of a raised boardwalk over a wetland. I know NRC has seen proposals over near through a birthplace and Minuteman, the Battle Road Trail for a concept that would be similar to this. This is a photograph of the area underneath the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail as it rises up and goes over Neshoba Brook, and then to my back, it then continues over Route 2. So there used to be a old, train trestle here with rotting creosote 8x8s that you could tiptoe across over to those Wright Road trails. That was removed as part of this process, but there are these huge abutments with these big shelves. And I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but you slap something down there, I'm sure. And then this is the existing bridge right off of Route 2 that connects down into those Wright Road trails. So that's there, and I know folks use that whole area. So that is a sort of a broad trail plan that would bring people to, all these beautiful views around the whole system. So that was dam removal with amenities.
And then we have the greater amenities.
So I just wanted to,
Or is
that
that
was, thank you, that was fantastic, and really, really great to see those pictures and the concepts. Just for time, I just want to note where that was,
Mhm.
15 minutes, we'd allocated 30 minutes for your group. I think this is great. I think what we should continue hearing from you. Just want to raise awareness. Some of this might eat into our small group time. That feels like it's worth it. We want to hear from you guys, you need to hear
Sure.
from us. So just noting, but you should continue.
Okay, so I want.
I think you guys are great.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Vicky, Liz, Malcolm, jump in with items that I didn't get on the map.
Yeah,
or-
so the last one was sort of the greatest amenities,
Mhm.
if we were to take it and say, what are the opportunities we might be leaving on the table, just in case, that we should be thinking about. So we had pulled together, in addition to, so we've sort of each one built on the other one. The idea of dredging part of this channel so that the deep portion does always stay at least 10 feet deep, because it seems that when we remove the dam, that even the deepest portion will not be 10 feet deep, and then we'll have problems with invasive. So
Oh, yeah,
it
yeah.
feels like we're gonna hold that deep portion. It needs to be some sort of dredge there to
Yep.
hold the 10 feet.
Okay.
So it says, let's dredge that to 10 feet and hold deep portion so we can do the skating and we can do the access and the open water kayaking and the 4 acres that we've been talking about. And if we need to help the channel get through here,
Mhm.
because there's some question about where this channel ends up in the bathymetry, so that dredging would be part of this. It's a much smaller dredge project.
Yep.
But it allows the things that we promise in some of these to be able to do them, to be sure that they're going to happen and not hope,
Mhm.
right? And then, the other option on when we get to Laws Brook is
Are you gonna show us that?
I can. I didn't do it on Google Maps, but, it does say that, that's all of this section here. So this is that 4 acre portion and says, okay, if we're going to keep that deep and attached to Giroux,
Uh-huh.
let's make that work.
Mhm.
And then the next piece of this is continuing those trails around, making sure that we can circumnavigate the whole
Yeah.
pond, because we talked about that quite a bit, and we're close, like, to being able to do it, and so these are these small portions of connectors. And then when we get to this corner, which is the Dunn Square.
Yeah.
We know that there's this dangerous intersection there, and so with the dam removal project, would we solve some of that danger there? As a pedestrian, you can't cross over there.
Oh.
So there's no sidewalk.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
sidewalk ends and then the sidewalk starts like a quarter
Yeah,
mile away.
that's right.
So if we could connect to the Bruce Freeman Trail, this is town-owned land against the Neshoba Brook. So could we just connect from here to there by making a sidewalk connection and connecting Dunn Square
Huh.
to the pocket park?
Huh.
Take that little piece of road, we now have a redundant roadway there, it's extremely dangerous. for
Yeah, I
those of
know.
us who try to
Yeah.
cross there. And so get rid of that additional road, connect the dam portion to Dunn Square, make that an actual piece of greenery that we can use. Have pedestrians cross through there and cross Commonwealth Avenue on that side of Neshoba Brook to connect to Bruce Freeman Trail. It's town-owned lands that we're talking about. The only pieces that are not are, this is town-owned land. This is that bridge portion that Jeff was talking about. It's some of this because it's on the MCI land, but
Yeah.
that's easier to talk about. This is the only piece, to try to fix the circumnavigation. This is the only piece then that would be on the roadway. Everything else ends up on land, which
Yeah.
seems really provocative. And then we continue to say, no matter where the water ends up, that we would continue the boat launch from Commonwealth Avenue,
Mhm.
Jeff had talked about. And maybe there's a difference between the one at Giroux and this one here. Maybe this is the accessible one. Maybe we still do have viewing here so people in wheelchairs can get out
Yep.
and still do the sunset view and the birding and all of that. But what happens at Giroux might be for a little bit more active
Yeah, yeah.
connection. And, but the dredging happens here. There may be dredging through here to get that channel to come through here. So that's something that we would need to scientifically work out, is the sort of extent of the dredge.
Yeah.
To be able to make that happen. So that's the biggest piece, is really adding this piece and acknowledging the dredge.
One question that comes to mind for me, I think, especially thinking about dredging and that remaining pond is, we've got a relatively small pond with a relatively high volume of water moving through it, and And when we start to think about ice skating, how close to, trying to skate on a canal or a channel is that, and would that be safe? I mean, right now, I think, those of us that skate out on Warner's Pond know that you're skating over 18 inches of water a lot of times, and that water's not moving that much in the winter time, and that's one of the reasons why it freezes so fast, and we get a chance to get out there. So I think I don't know, I'm sure there's somebody that can do that calculation and figure it out, but I think that in this scenario, we need to address how realistic is it to expect that it's gonna, that a pond like that would freeze given the water flow.
Yeah, so the skating is the one question. The other part of it is we keep talking about this as being a deep part of the pond, and if it's
Yeah.
only gonna be 5 feet deep
Right,
and it's gonna fill up with sediment and invasives, is it realistic to say we
Yeah.
have some deep water here?
and it's gonna be processing a lot of water, basically, it's a wide spot in the channel. I think.
That's right,
So,
and sediment's still coming through.
Yeah.
And so if it is the lowest point,
Yeah.
does sediment build up? How long does that take?
Yeah.
And is it really realistic that it's not just gonna be channel?
Some questions online?
Yeah, so let's go to David. Go ahead.
Wait, should I
Oh,
go through what we
sorry.
have as open questions before, just in case?
What's that?
Should we
Liz
look
has
at,
her portion. of
yeah,
it.
Oh,
Open questions.
yeah, so just check David and Paul, were you comfortable holding these? Are these time sensitive?
Well,
Or
I
what-
wanted to know on this diagram here that's
Just a
showing.
quick Q&A on this, and then we can move on. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, what's happening with Scout Island in this version here?
Yeah, so I think we still showed, and if you see the underlay here, we do put a boat launch on Scout Island. It connects over on the northwest side of Scout Island to the waterway. Because that's probably the closest it gets to Scout Island, and so it would be easier to get a boat launch on that side. Now, the question becomes, then you'd have to launch from here, go through to get to that boat launch there. Could it-
And that is a long dock, is that what you're showing there?
Yes, it's a long dock, because at some point, wherever land is today, the channel that's left is going to be further away from land than it is today. The edge moves.
Okay, yeah, the launch on Scout Island would be fine, but I don't think that would be workable for scouting these from Commonwealth.
So we should add that to this. We should figure out what would be workable for the scouts.
That was one alternative. One thing that we mentioned, I think at some point in our conversation, is the idea of using heavy equipment to not just encourage if you can encourage the channel to come very close to the common output, and that's great. Or is there almost a little
Just Scout
channel, a side channel that tees into the channel from common?
And will it be maintained over time?
But I think David, wasn't your point that the dock is too long? You'd want that channel closer to Commonwealth Avenue, is that what you're
But then how
suggesting?
do we get to Scout Island? from
Yeah,
there?
I'm just wondering, wasn't that the?
Well, yeah, it's just to cart 8 canoes out a long dock, put them in, and we have well, the number of
Yeah,
you witnessed what we do. It's a major flotilla of back
Yeah.
and forth, and it's just that would kill the ceremonial opportunities that we currently rely on.
But that's the reality of the distance from the analysis report of where the channel will end up if we remove the dam and the current edge of Commonwealth Avenue.
I understand, and that's why I was making such a point about Giroux Park, is like, if that's the case, could we then replace it with water's edge access for a truck and trailer at Giroux?
Yeah,
Harder,
Okay,
harder.
so this
It's
is,
very steep.
yeah,
Giroux is steep at the water's edge. It's a good 5 to 8 foot drop.
Please.
You're gonna do like a switchback through the land that we've just, through the 100-foot buffer. It's gonna be a
Mhm.
switchback access. I don't know that you'd get a car down there.
no,
Yeah, it's
So-
practically a bluff.
Yes.
It's the highest place you could possibly.
It's right.
access the water
It's the most
from.
expensive spot to access, but especially for a car. I don't know.
You guys understand the challenge that
With the
David's
100.
raising,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
I think that's the key, for
Yep.
this meeting.
But that's the downside
Yeah.
of this.
Paul, go ahead.
Yeah,
And
just,
no.
just a quick comment. It's very intriguing because as I mentioned before, the Giroux piece would only be one aspect of sort of recreational opportunities, but it's interesting how the Giroux piece fits in here. I do have a question, and you probably haven't thought this far ahead, but in terms of priorities and sequencing, what the highest priorities of implementation of a plan like this? Have you thought about what those would be?
No,
Priority one,
that's why
two,
we're
three?
here. And that's why we're here, Paul, because we got to
Yeah.
this place. It's like we could do extremely little and have what I call the spend plan, because he was gonna present it. And very little access, very little dredging or no dredging. Or we go all the way here, we go in between and get the circumnavigation and a couple of boat launches. Like, what do we want to do and how do we want to present this stuff? Is this continue?
Yeah.
Are we
Well-
solving fish passage recreation, all those things that we were supposed to be solving with these.
Are there quote unquote easy pieces versus difficult pieces here? It strikes me that the boat launches are relatively easy. The trails are relatively more complex because lots of boardwalks and I'm sure we'll think about that later, but it's a great
Yes,
plan.
we didn't actually show, like, I don't think we didn't really talk through Sven's plan, but it was essentially just like, take out the dam, see what happens, throw in a couple of boat launches. Like that was, I mean, because we wanted to really kind of show, like we said, the gamut of like, what happens if you do, like literally just pull it up, make it as cheap as possible versus like, how do we really, yeah.
Basically, it's like, let the water do what it's going to do. We would, at the end of Pond Road, we would have, we'd connect over through that piece of public owned land and have a viewing area. We'd connect these two trails, so you could have viewing. You couldn't circumnavigate. You would just walk out there and then you'd walk back.
Yeah.
So, you could do those two things. And then we'd have a little bit of a launch. Maybe this is more dirt here. Maybe the edge of the Commonwealth Avenue goes out further and the dirt is closer. I don't know, but it's gonna be a little bit steeper because it's gonna be down 5 feet. So I don't know what this condition is.
Yeah,
but
I
we
don't
could-
I don't know. I don't know
That's
how
it.
I don't know how steep the Giroux thing is. We'll have to take a look at it, but it's interesting that the dredging piece is part of this. I think you're right. I think to maintain the channel and to optimize it, you're going to have to dredge to some extent, but that's a whole nother can of dredge material.
I think with some of this stuff, it's only
So,
got 4
yeah.
pages.
Malcolm has been very patient, so let's
And
make
so
sure he
is
has a chance
Liz.
to ask his question, and Liz too, I think, okay. Let's go to Malcolm first, and then come back to the main room.
He's in your group, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think two things is, one, it's very difficult at the moment to make any firm statement about where the channel will ultimately go, how deep it will form itself naturally, and how much dredging might be necessary to either the channel or the deep hole without a really solid hydrological assessment. So a lot of that is currently speculation until we can get some expert opinion on all of that. But the other thing I wanted to add to the overall proposal was that we had talked about perhaps using what is now the current little pocket park as somewhere to record the history of both the river prior to colonial settlement and both the colonial period and the industrial period. Some of that may also involve, sorry, there's an announcement going on. I don't know if that ruins everything. To really be able to have signs maybe concentrated in that park, but also around, if we were to make a walkway, that would commemorate the history of this area, as it has been key to the development of West Concord.
Thanks, Malcolm.
One other major point is for our group is that we are eagerly awaiting the basis of design report for the 30% design.
Mhm.
So there's,
Yeah.
maybe we'll get to the questions, there are a lot of questions that were like, we're hoping they're answered.
Yeah.
Right.
I think a lot of the, like the ecological communities, the depth, I mean, the depth that they are, we've provided comments that are being incorporated right now into the design report, and what we understand is that it's a 4 to 6 foot depth under normal base flow conditions at the deepest point. You know, but whether or not that, you know, we've asked for a little bit more elaboration, just to understand like what it looks like. What is it at the shallowest point? Would be helpful to understand, particularly from the point of, does there need to be dredging? I mean, the channel will reform itself, but you know, what kind of depth is gonna be an acceptable depth? I have two, well, I have a question and a comment, and my comment is regarding, I love that trail that goes all the way around. But this, this is on the other side of the river from.
Right,
Trevor
right,
Brook
right.
Bakery. This is not town land.
Whose land is that?
It shows up.
It shows up
On both
as town
sides.
owned on the assessor's map. I thought we would.
I can share it. I think I pulled it up. Oh, yeah.
one side is private, the
It's all private.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so the key there.
Yeah, I think it comes up as being part of the 56 Winthrop, doesn't it?
Yes, 152 LLC. Oh, well, it depends. Let me,
Yeah.
let me, let me get.
But it's right now just a mess of shrubs.
Yeah.
And
Here you're talking about.
tree-
Can I share
Fallen
my screen?
tree.
Yeah.
Actually, the beavers love it. They down about 6 trees a year. That one of them.
And Liz, I know you still want to chime in. So we'll
I
talk
mean, I
to you.
feel like at most, at this point,
This is really important.
yeah,
She's the question person.
yeah, I mean, I can talk
What
about this.
didn't we
Well, oh, you know,
answer?
we found.
Let's let
Yeah.
Julie go and then we'll
Oh, yeah.
come to you. Yeah.
Okay, so that is owned by the bakery, that highlighted parcel. And then
Yeah.
this one here is owned by.
It's Brookside.
Yeah, that's Brookside. And so that's, oh, I'm sorry, that's on the other side, but. This one is owned by the Winthrop,
Wait, going back to the Winthrop piece,
the
Yeah.
bakery piece.
the bakery piece, sorry. Yeah, that one.
So here's the river here.
Yeah,
Or the
so the
brook.
bakery owns the other
So
side.
Brookside Village, I think there's an easement on that Riverside Trail there, I could be wrong. You or permission, you know.
Yeah, I
or
think that's right.
license Or whatever.
This trail here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
so,
think that's right.
so, and there is a path behind the Shelbyville Bakery.
Yep.
And then the gas station.
This is,
sort
I
of
mean, right, this is a
potential
feasible, I
future
think that this. right.
Yeah, so there has been talk of getting this connected
Yes.
here. I mean, the issue is there's no crossing here, so we have to solve this if we want this to be a connection.
Yeah, it's a key.
Yeah.
Because right now you can see the sidewalk ends in front of Chris's house here. So if you're walking along Commonwealth Avenue, there's no way to cross right now. And if it's dark
Yeah.
at night,
Mm.
it's incredibly dangerous. This is a very narrow road. There's no sidewalk. So you end up here, you walk along the road all the way here till here to reconnect to the sidewalk. So this area and this road right here is incredibly redundant with this. If you want to make a right turn onto Commonwealth Avenue, you could do this, right? So this piece is what's making it very dangerous. So one proposal is to just get rid of this, connect this green to this green.
Yeah.
And get a crossing over to here,
Mhm.
so that we can connect this sidewalk and this Lawsbrook connection right across here, cross Commonwealth Avenue, either on this side or this side, however, to get to the Bruce Freeman Trail. Because right now, you can't go from right out to Bruce Freeman without doing right this
Ridiculous.
and then this and then that, which is completely not what you
Yeah.
would think you would.
Yeah, because as a pedestrian, you get to that corner of the bottom corner of Kenny Dunn, and you're like praying that no one is going really
Exactly.
fast down the commercial
I
strip, because
almost
it's like a
got hit
curve.
right here on my bicycle coming in this way. This person did not want to stop. I actually had to hit his van to
Yes.
stop.
Coming down here, as soon as they take the turn,
They're
they
off.
step on the gas.
They sure do.
And so you're like in the middle of the road, you're like.
I know, we have like like I have a text chain that's,
Yeah, that's a good point.
So anyway,
That's a really good
dangerous.
point. That's
And if we're getting rid of the dam and we're asking people to be on this piece of greenery, whatever it is, fishing, and we're
Yeah.
talking about all these great things,
Right.
there has to be a way to get here, right?
Yeah.
And this could be part of that
In
solution.
some ways, Losbrook should tee into.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what engineering would want.
they
That's
had
what-
that
yeah.
traffic survey a couple of years, a year
We
or so
didn't go
ago, but I
that
don't think
far,
there's a lot
but I
of
think that
feedback
that's a
around
great
that
solution.
area, so.
And
It
just,
would be
Well,
safer.
And get a crossing here with.
Yeah, yeah.
Because then you'd have a
And
traffic
connect to a
control, a
sidewalk.
stop sign or something
Yeah.
like this, right now.
Cause you wanna know where the sidewalk ends, Shel Silverstein, it's like right here.
That's why Sammy's joining us, right? Take care of it.
Sammy's stormwater.
So is it an opportunity to look at some of those problems that are, here in this area? Anyway, that was, so, but you had.
Yeah.
Yes,
Go ahead.
no,
We
yes,
still,
we just.
remaining questions.
Yeah, we just sort of, I honestly, most of them, we haven't brought up throughout the presentation, but we wanted to kind of acknowledge that we still have like a lot of open questions regardless of which kind of where on the scale of minimal intervention to maximal intervention. And we sort of, there are two like some big groups, and as Jeff and Vicky and Malcolm were all saying, like, talking about the end state, the path, the depth at low and water, low and high water times. How do we think through that deep area? Does sediment somehow settle there because it's deeper, or like, how will it continue to move through? Or not, so yeah,
Well,
so,
so if the dam were to be removed, my understanding, just from how, you know, a riverine system works, is that it carries the sediment with it.
okay,
It drops out, it would drop out when it hits a slower moving, so like where it comes into the acid bed.
okay. that
It's the
makes sense.
anticipated.
Where things are more drop.
Would
okay.
that deep hole be a slower moving area?
Like a 4 acre, a deep pool.
Well, what's in the bed load would be in the channel. And so the sediment would be in the channel of that as it flows through, and it is about the same size as Macomb. Macomb is a little under 4 acres, and this is anticipated to be 4.5, so similar size.
Similar size, okay.
I mean, it may, that's not a question I feel comfortable,
Yeah, I don't
you know,
know.
answering.
It's always one that needs to be answered.
Yeah, so
It
it's
is still
Yeah,
open.
that's
It's
an
still
open question.
yeah, and so, and to the point earlier made, like, there's some hope that the basis of design will give us a little bit more clarity on this, maybe not all of it.
That question is
That
not
question,
answered.
not that one.
I think these are questions
Yeah,
that
so-
we can continue to
Yeah,
ask.
so I think that kind of as we get, some of these questions might fall out as we kind of get through the basis of design. The other group of questions were sort of around like different, what kind of plant communities would we have? Where they're likely to come up, and then thinking about proactive and ongoing management plans, like what kind of things are we gonna have to think about in terms of invasives? And again, like kind of all of the along the spectrum, we think need to think about those things. And then I think that those are the two, and then we had some, oh yeah, we had some odd and ends questions. Fish, which we thought we were gonna talk about today. We
Mhm.
were, and then,
Mhm.
I had reached out to Delia, I haven't like looked at this yet. But like, we want to have an understanding of like the funding sources that are potential. And. Oh, we had some ideas about, are there any kind of objective metrics that could be used to kind of evaluate what we're thinking about when we're thinking about aesthetic appeal?
Mhm, mhm.
And then. The last question, oh, and it's public health, yeah, so those, most of our questions were in those two main groups.
Yeah, but we should focus a minute on the fish, because, at the low and the high.
Yeah.
What is the fish passage under the bridge? The new, the Commonwealth Ave Bridge, because right now it's like 6 inches deep. Is it going to be deeper? Can fish get through in August? Is it, every month, like what kinds of fish are we attracting here in the new dam removed scenario? And we know in January, there's quite a bit of water there, so a lot of fish passage can happen, but what is it now in August and July, which is what we were presented by ORS, the July, August scenarios? And are we solving them, or do we need to do something more to get fish into here? Like that, if that was one of the goals,
Mhm.
are we solving? It's kind of like, do we need to dredge to have the channel and the deep water really stay? Do we need to do something else at the bridge to have fish pass through?
Yeah, as we're talking about this like out loud, and I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me before, but it seems like some of these questions are gonna kind of point us towards, do we need a more hands-on dredging sort of dam removal scenario, or?
Yeah.
Um,
So until we answer do we solve this fish problem, or do we have to do something? Do we solve the invasives and deep water problem, or do we have to do something? Do we
Mhm.
solve the flora and fauna scenarios, or invasives and management plans? Or do we need to do something?
I think we're all thinking about the fish as well. I mean, what what fish are there, what are gonna come,
Yeah.
what will not come? I mean, I think that's whatever route we choose, I think that's a question that we all have.
That's
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have answers at the next meeting.
Yeah.
The fisheries.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, from the
So-
standpoint of the invasives,
Mhm.
what you have upstream is what you can anticipate is gonna come down. You know, and loosestrife is, you know, in the upstream environment, and as you mentioned, the Gallericella beetles, and it's not one that I mean, I don't know how, Jeff, you feel about this, but, you know, to me, with all the releases that, you know, the town, Land Trust, Fish and Wildlife have done, you know, 10 to 15 years ago, there's a remnant population, a living population, because there's still remaining loosestrife, and it, you know, every time I see loosestrife, I go, because the bees love it. So you want to keep some, but I go and I check it, and you can see these little dots of leaf damage, which indicate the beetles are still active, and so that's one I don't feel as concerned about compared to not weed and Phragmites, but I'm not. And I don't have, you know, as much familiarity with the upstream, but I've walked both Neshoba Brook and Fort Pond, and I haven't seen those. It's been a while, and I haven't looked at it from that lens of like what, and I think that would be helpful to really kind of understand, because that's what will come down.
It would
That's
also be
what-
good to have you walk Wright Road and Pond Road and see, you know, the growths into the pond of those dark green areas, because there's already
I know there's
some.
buckthorn, I know there's
Yeah.
terrestrial invasives.
Yeah, because
on
we
the
took,
pond.
one, like, we took a walk, or I took a walk and took some, like, we have, I mean, all this stuff, like, it's like, yeah, of course we have multiflora,
Yeah.
of course we have knotweed, of course we have, like, whatever the other, like. there's something else
So
I
how do we
don't
get
know.
rid of those?
So, yeah,
first
so
and
it's
keep
kind
them
of-
away, yeah.
It's a perennial question.
I know.
But we already have acres of it. and
Yeah, so it's
is
sort
this
of like,
going to
how do
have
we,
more acres
like,
of it or less?
it's kind of, how do we look at it in a proactive and an ongoing way, right? So like, what do we need to make sure we're doing when we remove to like minimize like,
Right.
and obviously it's like native planting, so like, how do we have that plan for native planting happen when the dam removal happens, so that we don't have hopefully as much
Perpetuating,
opportunity.
yeah.
Right, for
for-
them to establish.
Right.
So I wanna,
I just point, I don't know how many people ever walk over Ice House Pond up in
Yeah.
Acton. I mean, that's the Neshoba Brook in pond form at about, you know, probably, I mean, it's long and narrow, so it hasn't got the same shape, but that's the exact water that's, you know, 15 minutes later is in, you know,
Yeah.
not quite 15, but very soon.
Yeah.
Is coming in, so we walk over there all the time, it's beautiful, but it's very different, yeah.
Mm.
And it's pretty closed in too, I mean, the woods are right up to it.
so just taking a quick step back, I wanna check in with you all, right? You wanted to come here and share these, and I think it's been fascinating. Great to see the progress you've made. You have some outstanding questions that you've named are important for you to try to get as much clarity as you can, in order to home in on your proposal. And I think we all have digested that. What would be most helpful for you to hear in terms of feedback from
Yeah.
this group that we can
Thanks.
offer to kind of help
Great
you?
question, because
move
this
forward.
is supposed to be not our proposal,
Yeah,
our proposal.
yeah, exactly.
So we are bringing it to you guys only because we were tasked, all of us, to
Yeah.
go off,
Yeah.
dig in, and come back so that we could all
Mhm.
rally around 1, 2, 3, 4 proposals from all of us.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
here we are.
So I think it would be super helpful for us to hear from you all. Here's what's missing. I didn't hear this. We don't have any
Mhm.
costs in there. We don't have any, you know, other elements, priorities. Paul mentioned priorities, or wrote that down. As you compare the work in your other groups, you know, what have you focused on? What do we need to supplement with to eventually weigh these against each other?
Or there are things that we should be
Mhm.
throwing out
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, like, are
Like, do
there,
we
Yeah.
keep three
Yeah.
schemes moving forward, or do we
Right.
keep them until you guys present? Like, how do we want to move
Mhm.
forward?
So, yeah, so I had two buckets. Can we help you narrow? Right, and then can we help you identify what you might not be thinking about
Yeah.
that this group would like to hear?
Because I keep coming back to it. These are your proposals
Mhm.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. Really wanna, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, this is my own opinion. I would go for the most fully engineered plan that you have. I think that's the one that would make the most sense. I think there's more to be done on that. I think the idea of a little bit of the dredging, I wonder whether you even have to consider moving the channel below the deep pool to get it closer to
Right,
the Commonwealth Avenue.
Yeah.
So that it bends around that way. I don't know if that's feasible or possible. I don't even know how that would work, but if you could consider getting it closer so that would, and help out with the scouts, that would be really a good thing. And then maybe, and also make sure the channel from where the river, where the brooks enter in really hits the deep pool, because there's been some thought that maybe it may not.
Right.
The other thing is, just a question. There's very little water coming over the dam now, right? It's just trickling, so it's not emptying every 24 hours. Is it? Because there's a huge amount.
I don't know if it's emptying every 24 hours, the amount of water that comes in comes out every 24 hours.
Does that, because I'm thinking Jeff's picture of the Neshoba Brook was a huge, wide incoming amount of water.
But that's
I
July.
sent you an out. Didn't I send you?
Oh, that was
the-
July.
I think that's right.
That's a little, but I sent you some pictures. down
So it's
of,
much more narrow now than.
I
was,
across from the bakery.
Another thing,
Yeah. I think I should.
just to throw in the hydrological mix, I was having coffee on the back deck of the Neshoba Bakery with a hydrologist, and she was saying, well, some rivers at times are sending into groundwater and some are receiving. So you could have groundwater coming in Neshoba Brook, sitting in the pond,
And then being
sending
sent
into
into
groundwater,
groundwater.
less is coming.
Down.
Yeah, okay, that's
Wherever
Wherever there's wetlands,
Darn it.
wherever there's wetlands hitting it, is where it actually is now seeping back into our
Yeah.
groundwater.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And into
My
plants,
basement, I'm gonna get
Yeah,
that.
that's a good
in.
point.
I think also the flooding is coming from the acid when the dam gets through. It's not coming from.
Oh, no, I was
It's gonna
saying,
come
like,
up
it
the
was
other way.
groundwater that led.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
good,
That's
good question. And then
my
one to
question.
keep on
That's
the
my opinion
agenda.
about the
Yeah.
construction,
Yeah,
which are the
yeah.
three plans.
So other reactions on sort of the two areas where we could be most helpful to this group?
I agree. I mean, you definitely have to go for the most robust one, because one of the points is, we want recreation, we want, we want it to be useful and not just take away whatever's already there. And so, it makes sense if you want to be able to go around the entire pond.
So I have a
Tough
question.
call.
I have a question then, so. Think about it. So so as we've been kind of talking about this, it seems like there's two kind of axes we're thinking about. We're thinking about, sort of amount of recreation we're providing, stuff like that. And then we're also thinking about like how much manipulation we're doing of the channel of the water.
Mhm.
So I think the question is, do we want to just like, is the scenario that you guys envision, like, is there a scenario, like, or not a scenario, like, are we saying throw out the idea of like just letting nature do its thing and letting the channel form where it may, like we should really only be thinking about dredging, or should we also be, because we can think about more than one proposal, we can think about, let's think about like maximal recreation and minimal engineering, I guess, of the brook is, I guess I'll phrase it, and maximal recreation, and do anything you need to do to the brook to make that happen.
Well, I'm thinking that, when we first started this, we said, okay, let's look at Envision Concord. And there's, we're looking at recreation, we're looking at ecology, we're looking at history, we're looking at the last two things, what they are. But, we're looking at this conglomerate of factors. And if we just take the dam down and let the stream do whatever, we're not taking into consideration those five
But
factors.
that's taking into consideration things that engineering it won't, like, it's taking resilience into consideration more than engineering the brook would. I think that's why it's asking. I feel like there's different sets of things that are good about either,
Right.
So that's why I'm kind of saying, like, I'm thinking, like, maybe we can narrow it down to two. Are we all saying, like, yes, let's try to put every recreational opportunity we can, maybe in a prioritized way, as Paul is saying, and then just kind of look at it. Once. I don't know, sorry.
So,
You might-
yeah, I think let's check in. I mean, if there are other folks who are kind of more intrigued by more making sure we have a more natural let nature do its thing approach on the table. And so I see Paul's hand and we'll check in with others as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, and, and I have to check out in a few minutes, but you can like the entire proposal, but I think the practical reality is that this has to be a phased approach because you can do so much modeling, but until you take down the dam and see what the actual natural channel is, you don't know how much dredging is needed. You don't know what recreational pieces are feasible. So, I mean, you can plan for all of it, but the sequencing and the funding allocation is going to have to be sequenced. But the first step would be, if we're headed in this direction, eventually, I'm not saying we are, you need to take down the dam and see what the channel does. You're not going to engineer it before you do that. So,
Or
I don't know.
or Paul, do we do a drawdown, see what it does, and engineer our way to the right solution for taking down the dam? Like, I
Yeah.
don't wanna just,
Yeah,
down and pretend that we're
yep.
gonna catch up to everything.
I will say from a permitting standpoint, that would be really challenging to get permitted, that the DEP and NRC, I mean, it would be a very tough sell to say we just want to see what happens, because there are adverse impacts from drawdown. And so I think you have to be able to demonstrate that you are working towards a goal, having it be like a pilot project.
So just to articulate the option that I think, Paul, you're suggesting is something where you could kind of have a sequenced approach where we remove the dam, we see where the natural channel is. And I don't think this group would be satisfied with basically saying, and our job is done, that's what we recommend, right?
No,
We
no.
would add on to that, it's a bunch of if-thens, right? If this is what it looks like, then this is what might be necessary, right? Once we learn more, if this is where that comes out, then this might be necessary. So that would be kind of what that option might look
Or
like.
we can ask an
Right.
engineer how to do it,
Exactly.
how to
Yeah.
phase it properly to
Exactly.
get the reaction.
Right,
Yeah.
but it is phasing.
Phase it.
This is not, this is not something you'd rely on a model.
No.
Well, I think in terms of proposal development, what makes sense to do is if we take the simply remove the dam, then it makes sense to list the adverse outcomes that are expected in terms of what that does for recreational opportunities, how it essentially eliminates the island part of Scout Island. And then think in terms of mitigations for those adverse outcomes. So the reason to propose, more dredging or new docks or trail system is to mitigate, to try and create an offset essentially of, this has been lost as a result of this activity. So therefore, put that back in to balance that. It's kind of the way I would think about it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Jefferson.
Just, thanks from all of us for all this feedback and, shout out to Malcolm for the.
I hope you have a good seat, Malcolm.
Great skill we have
This last
there.
time.
I think he lost his seat
But I will say that, so I like this kind of the if-thens or the prioritized list, because once we put costs on there, I'll put right out there that I'm a little wary of a Christmas tree approach where it's like, oh, this dam removal, now it's $10 million. Came up with that idea.
Yeah.
That's a non-starter.
Right.
But
Right.
while we maximize against all the criteria that we're looking to.
He's seated.
Yeah.
That was my point too, that one of the criteria is fiscal responsibility, and so I think that was a huge
Yeah,
factor, and
yeah.
that may overrun everything else.
Mhm.
So do you think that maybe if we take an approach of like, this is what we could solve for up until. To solve for any more, we're gonna need to manipulate. So then like, here's the proposal of up until
Mhm.
sort of what, now I can't remember, is that Chris or Mark, you were saying, like, what are all mitigations we can put into place against what has taken out up until like, oh, and at this point, we're gonna need to manipulate the brook and then have
Yeah.
that be a second proposal. Is that,
I don't see why you don't write up a proposal with all the things that you think covers all the criteria that we would like. We don't know the cost of it yet. And then there might be some things we need to pare away eventually. But I think that was the most exciting proposal, part of the proposal. I think that would be the one that you want to develop more fully for us. Yeah, it covers, it seems to cover a lot of issues. That I think, Delia just said, you may not even need to phase this in, but if you take the dam out, there's gonna be engineering right away, because you have to remove all those chunks of concrete out of the way, you have a berm that's along the side, all those things would have to be worked in. But so there'll be some, so I think it's okay to further engineer it. And you're right, we won't know exactly where the stream goes, but then you can make further adjustments.
Well,
let's
unless
say.
we dredge our way into
Unless you
that,
dredge.
we say we actually want the.
Right.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sk-
that's right.
stream. We want to assure that the stream
Right.
doesn't ever get
And that-
more than
And I-
50 feet from Com Ave.
I mean, I
you
think
know.
that's permittable. I
Mhm.
think,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, I've seen projects where streams have been, relocated and I think there needs to be a good reason for it.
Right.
But if there's a compelling purpose that can be, can fit within the regulations, I think that's.
Yeah,
And if you're saying it's 4 to 5 feet, I don't think it's that much dredging. I think it's just making sure that the channel does what we're.
Right.
So what I would hate to have happen is us come up with a dam removal proposal, and then we end up with a scheme where it's like, what do you mean? You don't know what it's gonna look like, and what do you mean you don't know where it's gonna
Yeah,
go? And what do
yeah.
you mean you don't know
That's true.
any of these, or we can't
Well-
access the water? What do you mean we have to have a 150-foot long dock? Like, I don't wanna have those be the
Right.
outcomes, if we can control them and say,
Yeah.
actually, we think that an accessible
yeah, accessible.
dock, ADA accessible from Com Ave.
And also
could
able to
only
have-
be 50 feet long or whatever.
Be able
we're
to
gonna
handle the
say.
scouts needs. Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
and so therefore the channel needs to be within 50
Moving
feet.
closer, yeah.
So
Malcolm has
one,
his
oh, go
hand
ahead.
up.
Malcolm
Malcolm.
does as well?
Yeah.
Still? Okay, Malcolm's still with us, great.
Malcolm, did you want to say something?
I just want to say that I'm actually sitting in my seat on the plane and we're about to take off, so I need to bow out. But thank you everybody for your input on this. It's been quite a tough activity putting all of this together. I commend Jeff and Liz and everybody for getting the presentation together. So thanks, and I will see you at the next meeting.
Great.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Malcolm.
Malcolm, amazing for you to join us.
Why say
Travel safely.
Yeah. I wanna just test something that I think I'm hearing kind of combining the perspectives of Jeff and Bill. Which is, maybe guidance for your group. It sounds like sort of there's interest in the task forces from some of the folks that we've heard from, right? That they do kind of want to know, like, what would the maximal approach look like? And then I think to your point, there is gonna have to be, some judgment calls among the task force based on costs.
Mhm.
So it seems like it would be useful when we're thinking about kind of the cost proposals to potentially say like, well, how much would adding this add to the cost? How much would adding this add to the cost? So we're not just presented with this thing you gave us is $5 million, but it's like, here's $5 million. If you take this out, and this out, then this is what that would look like differently. Now it's $1 million, right?
Yeah, I'm
So,
hoping that,
yeah.
so the boardwalks would be split out. You'd be saying, okay, the cost for all of your boardwalks is
Mhm.
$500,000. We'd be able to say, oh,
Right,
okay, I guess we
right.
can't afford that, or
exactly.
dredging that
Yeah.
you've shown is worth $1 million, the
Right.
dam removal is worth $1 million. You'd be able to see the parts if we ask for a bid that's
Right.
at least,
Yeah.
some
cross
sort of
out, yeah.
identification,
Yeah.
like they do,
Yeah.
like.
So,
you
so
saw
one
anyway.
suggestion, just as far as the trail amenities
Yeah.
go, I mean, oops.
But it just, it seems like that, what I just articulated is where the group is. Is that, okay, good, guess. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Time for this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't.
This one here, maybe?
So it was the one that showed the trail
All the way
connections.
around.
That's the one we had.
Yeah, this
you
one.
have
That was
it
a lot
on
better,
there.
right?
You have it on-
This one on
you have it
screen?
on the screen. Can we get it back?
Yeah,
on the
that
screen?
screen.
Yeah,
Screen.
well, work on it.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
And
Yeah.
then these are the boardwalk pieces of it.
So I was just gonna suggest, and maybe I don't have the graphic for this, but the boardwalks are gonna be the most very expensive.
Yep.
Yeah.
We
Piece of
agree.
that, so here, where you have the ability
Mhm.
to not have this, well, actually, it's not here.
So-
It's up.
It's on the other one,
It's on the other one, the other
It's
one
not,
Jeff put up.
the one Jeff, you have your
Yeah.
first
I'm
slide.
having battery issues.
So
I know where you
where
mean.
you had suggested go over to the farm field and come down.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Through the fields, or
Yeah.
you had suggested that. I
Right.
think that is a more realistic and less expensive.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess I would just sort of, as you're thinking about this, think from a cost and also permitting feasibility,
Right.
alternatives. are always asked, like,
Yep.
can you achieve the same purpose and not be
Yep.
like in the resource area?
Yep.
Bruce and Mark,
And then-
thank you both, yeah.
And then also the thoughts around what's public works, like with that teeing.
Yeah.
The
Oh, the streets,
crosswalk,
yeah,
what,
yeah.
you know, like, who belongs to what, and
Yeah, yeah.
really sort of
Right.
pick up some of those costs
Right.
now or into the future.
That's a good
That's
point.
right.
Really
Yeah.
thinking about
So
that.
Yeah, that
I
doesn't
know
have to be
that,
part
I
of
know
it.
that Public Works has been trying to, you know, I mean, when they've been trying to have improvements at that.
Right.
Site
So
for a long
it's a
time.
matter of really thinking about that, the ideal, if we
Yeah.
see the ideal,
Right,
this is part of the ideal program.
That's
But
right.
really, when we think about the costs, those costs go over to them and then
That's
they
right.
have
That's
to
right.
think
It's not
about
part
their
of it.
budget,
This is
right?
a
So,
roadway project. This is
you
a
know,
bridge
is that-
project, yeah.
Is that natural resources or recreation when we're talking about a trail,
Right.
right? So, and sort of that.
well, and how does the prison feel about it?
And then
Or
how does the prison
DOC,
feel
how
about
does
it?
DOC feel
And what
about
are-
trails on
and
their
what are
land?
trail
Yes,
grants?
that's
What, you know,
right.
what potential trail grants are there that can actually help
Yeah, yeah.
think about that as well? So it's really sort of not just thinking about the cost, but thinking about, what else is out there that could potentially.
So
fit that.
exciting.
It is.
So I think one of the benefits of the process that we're going through here is that we have detailed folks that think deeply on each point. And when we were working on it in our group, and we noticed in our rubric, one of the sections is ideas that you considered and decided to set aside.
Mhm.
So I would suggest, capture the thinking of it. If you think about some element of it that appears to be too expensive or only has a limited value, it's great to capture that and log it in there, because that helps us with, okay, that's not a new idea when somebody comes along and reads this
Right,
later or
right.
something, or,
Mhm.
or, maybe it wasn't just worth it. So
Mhm.
that's one way to
Yeah.
sort of keep the work.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then we'll add to this, once we learn about the fish
Right.
passage, we'll add the
Mhm.
fish passage
Yeah.
solutions to this. since
Mhm.
We do need to solve that at the end of the day. with this thing.
Great. So, were there more hands that I missed?
Not that I saw.
Okay, so just, I think, status check, I think, work group, are you
Okay.
feeling like you've gotten some good guidance and we
We
can?
covered a lot in 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's right, well done. Okay.
Great presentation, by the
Amazing
way. It's really well done. Thank you. Really good.
So just status check, we had initially planned, I'll just take, a little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
We as a planning team were touching base before this and said, oh, there are a lot of really important discussions. We want to make sure we give them the time they need.
Yes.
We know that work groups have been meeting independently. We also want to make sure they each have a chance to kind of check in and get feedback from the large group, and that piece is probably most important.
Mhm.
We don't know that we necessarily need to spend time in this meeting with the work groups convening. So question to you all, I mean, my proposal would be, let's skip past the work group breakout.
Sure.
Unless the work group feels like you really need it, and
Set up another
we can check in with the other two work groups and give you each just a chance to share where you're at and offer the same, obviously you all prepared a presentation. We're not expecting anything at that level from the other work groups, but just a chance to get some informal check-in feedback based on where you are from the larger group. Does that seem like,
That's a good idea.
yeah?
Sure.
Okay.
Because I think that'd be great, because there might be some overlap and there might be some learnings between us. We want to learn from what you guys have been discovering too.
Yeah. So, let's do that. Rachel, I'm gonna save your fingers and switch off. Okay. And let you facilitate this piece. Okay.
Can you take me to audio? Oh my God.
Yeah.
I see you have,
Yeah.
I took David's suggestion about measurements and I put that in this version.
Okay.
That's a better one for you.
Gonna talk in general about
Okay,
what's
that's
in
good.
it.
You don't have to use any of it at all. I just
Yeah.
wasn't sure. I was gonna bring it to our meeting.
You ready?
Yeah, so please go
Okay.
ahead. Yeah,
So, where are we?
we're at,
at,
we're a large group report outs.
Large
Yeah.
report outs,
Yeah.
okay. Does any group want to go first to share your progress, questions that have come up, or just a summary of what you've been talking about so far?
I can
Okay,
certainly-
Mark.
So,
The do nothing.
yeah,
Yeah, do nothing.
the no action.
Doing nothing.
It's been a lot of action and no action. We're kind of. Our work is focusing on kind of trying to institutionalize how we manage these resources. And so it came up earlier in this meeting, the recognition that we're talking about a recreation area, a recreation parcel really, that's right next to a conservation parcel, and these things are interacting. And that we have structures in town that are designed to manage these different resources, and there's not necessarily a great communications system designed to make sure that that's happening. And so, what we're kind of calling our proposal is renewing and expanding a management plan and trying to really dig into what does that management plan really look like and how would it get structured, with the idea that what it does is facilitate decision-making over time. And so what we just talked about, I think, segues nicely into that, because we can see that it would set in motion a process of steps that's designed, you know, for some target or goal. And so we started with the recognition of some of the existing conditions, that Warner's Pond is cherished, that the pond has some significant issues that need to be addressed, that there's change going on, and that there's quite a bit happening in the vicinity. I hadn't even thought about pulling in the intersection or the opportunity to complete a sidewalk, but that certainly plays into that. And then we try to really, building off of that, say, okay, well, there's some goals that we could articulate now in the short term. And then there's some scope and jurisdictional issues that we could try to put a stake in the ground about too. And those generally boil down to what's the scope and responsibilities of the NRC, and probably thinking of them as sort of the lead agency with respect to this, because we're starting from a pond orientation. Then there's scope and responsibilities for the Recreation Commission, which is involved with the Giroux features and those elements. And then there's some additional pond management scope and responsibilities, which mostly boil down to things that the Department of Public Works is responsible for doing. They're maintaining the dam. They're the hands and feet that, you know, really do a drawdown or some other thing. And there's some management activities that have been attempted, and we're trying to recognize those and see how we might build on those, all with an eye towards both sort of preserving what we have and recognizing that it's going to change. And so that we're basically trying to create a governance structure. The primary idea is to land these different responsibilities, both, you know, geographically and in terms of specific goal outcomes with these groups, and then create a structure where they will naturally collaborate periodically to make sure that things are going on. And I referenced a minute ago this idea that has come up a few times, that you know, should there or should there not be a specific group that's tasked with, you know, Warner's Pond. There was a Warner's Pond stewardship group. There's been a White Pond, there's several White Pond task forces. Or do we need this pond idea, you know, pond management or waterway management altogether in the town as a new function? We've sort of, at this point, our subgroup at least has a consensus that we're leaning away from that, and rather saying there's a lot of existing structure. All we need to do is organize that structure and sort of clarify who's doing what and do that. So that's kind of the state of our discussion. We're on the roughly 8th version of this proposal as we add to it and refine it, and that's kind of what we can look forward to.
Any questions or comments from anyone?
I just have a question, like when you're talking about like maintaining it, are you thinking about any sort of like invasives and things like that as well, or is that?
Well, we're certainly identifying the control of aquatic invasives as one of the major goals, and recognizing that there's been attempts in the past to do that, and suggesting that some of the possible ways of, you know, more aggressive even treatment plans, including we had on our calendar for this week, but we're gonna have to postpone it for another week. A member of the Bear Hill Pond and Harvard Conservation Committee. She's gonna come and talk to us, and we have, you know, some documentation about what they've actually done. So they've been trying to do annual drawdown for about 10 or 12 years now.
Yeah.
And they've had, you know, what I call mixed success, if I read their report right. All kinds of things that, you know, it's weather dependent, it's they're actually actively pumping out the pond below the level of their, and so what happens when your pump breaks in the middle of the winter and the pond fills back up, and, you know, those kinds of things. So, you know, trying to understand some practicalities of that, but recognizing that within this context, we could call for, and it, you know, at least an attempt, a pilot, or, you know, to do that, or even specify one outcome in this proposal could be that we decide that we are going to try annual drawdown for 5 years and see whether that's successful or not successful at dealing with some of the problems. And there's also some learnings there about what they're monitoring in terms of water quality. They're looking at the suspended solids. They're looking at some of the same things we are, oxygen levels. They're looking at phosphorus levels and those kinds of things. So, you know, some of those programs and the learnings of other groups that are actively trying to manage their pond in order to retain their resources would definitely fit into this framework that says, what do we need to do to keep what we have and kind of enhance that according, you know, recognizing that there are no problems there.
And then I'm curious, this is such good information. I love it so far, but I also, my question would be, how does this relate to some of the management plans that have been put out to the town before?
So we're talking specifically about, you know, pulling forward some of the things that are in the
Okay.
2012
Yeah, the
watershed
2012.
management plan
Yeah.
specifically,
Yeah.
and saying, okay, some of has been tried and some of it may need to be updated, but, you know, what do we know now, and how could that be enhanced? And that would, one of the options I think that we have, if we decide that this is the task force's primary recommendation, is that we as a task force could sort of take up the framing of the sort of version 1 of this plan before handing it back to the NRC and say, okay, we're not saying set up a permanent committee to manage Warner's Pond, but you did bring all of us together. We've developed this body of knowledge and some real detailed understanding of the conditions. So we might as well take a stab at what is year 1 to 5, or even year 1 to 10 sort of look like on that roadmap, and then turn it over to an annual process. It's been my suggestion, and again, you know, we're still in active discussion about this, but there are these groups that are forming around the town called roundtables. So we have a housing roundtable, we've got a climate sustainability roundtable. So, and that's when multiple committees and commissions and interest groups in the town get together roughly quarterly or a couple of times a year to actually sort of dig into that. And we're thinking that some kind of framework of that included recreation, public works, and NRC, along with citizens groups like the Friends and Oars and the Scouts, could come together at least annually. And we'd be recommending that the NRC take on the responsibility of convening that to specifically say, okay, here's the progress we've made. These are what we're measuring, and, you know, do we think we can, what are the next steps?
So just one comment,
Yeah.
I don't think CPW would be in favor of us doing suggesting a drawdown and then telling them that they had to do it. So if there were a drawdown that is pursued, that would be something that Natural Resources would sub out to a consultant.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The other thing, by the way, we have in the report, and there's so much, we're not there yet, but we have it's intriguing notion about having pond stewards.
Yeah.
To help us to monitor the conditions in the pond, to let us know about what's happening, what we're not seeing, what events they're taking place, et cetera. And have them almost parallel to what we do with trail stewards now in town. That's part of it. And then a few other things that we're thinking about in terms of, getting rid of invasives. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I would suggest is that there be some sort of cross with the other waterways in the town, like White Pond and. You know, we should start treating them more as like knowledge bases really about water in the town, because. As the Friends group has been meeting, and then all of a sudden, some folks, I wasn't able to go, but a few folks went to a White Pond meeting. A lot was learned, and a
Yeah.
lot of people there were like, oh, gosh, we have so much to share with you. I wish you would have told us you were struggling with some information, and so. Why not have it be a town-wide discussion
Well,
about
that's what Mark.
water, yeah.
Yeah.
If this is an annual convening, could there be an annual open water, I don't know what it's gonna be called, but you know, convening of lessons, like, oh gosh, this year we had so much bacteria, what did you do about it? I
Yeah,
don't know, I mean, Walden dealt with it, White dealt with it, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, the case where the town is in the butter or even the property owner that surrounds a pond. And in particular, where there's a recreation, an active recreational area. So one of the distinctions that we're drawing, by the way, is active and passive
Yes, yes,
recreation.
yes,
And so we've talked about what we mean by that, and the beach at White Pond would qualify as active recreation because there's lessons and programs that are being done there. And so I think we need to sort of both understand those distinctions and talk about, but there could be a set of criteria that say when there's an active recreation area and there's town-owned property next to a resource like this, there's a certain set of things that regularly need to be done about that.
It's smart.
Yeah. And we also recognize that, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail goes by both of these
Right,
particular
right,
ponds.
right.
And that,
There's a connection.
and there's concerns about what that leads to. All you have to do is look at the go by Walden Pond to understand what can happen.
But also there's been talk, too, that we are putting too much pressure on White because
Yeah.
it's the only place that provides certain kind of recreation, and so can we provide
Yeah.
relief valve to some of that?
Yeah, recognizing that they're ecologically quite different, but,
Yeah.
functionally, there's certain functional lens, they look similar, and then in other ways, they look very different.
Any other questions, comments?
Did we lose
All right.
Paul too? Was Paul?
That's Paul.
Yeah, he
Oh,
had
Yeah,
said-
yeah.
Yeah.
To leave. What's the next group that, you have one group left, right? Yes.
Brendan.
Yeah, all right, well, I'll start then, yeah. Okay, so basically, what we're mainly talking about is taking a look at the initial proposal, looking at dredging. The, 35,000 cubic yards. What will that look like? We would need to get like we would need to get, a cost estimate on what that would be. And while we were doing a cost estimate on that, we would also look at probably two other volumes of dredging. But before we even do that, one of the important features that or important questions that we have is the space between Route 2 and the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And that area is where MCI has told us that we can put the dredge material. So our main question, we're waiting to hear the information on this, is what is the cubic yardage how much cubic yardage will that area hold? And once we determine that amount, then that will allow us to say, okay, based on that, can we leave, what makes sense to leave some dredge in the pond? Is there an alternative as well? Like, could we go back to the original MCI location if it's a lesser amount? So those are the things that we've been working on, mainly, and also within that, we're concerned about fish passage as well. But the questions are, well, what type of fish? And the same questions that we talked about before that we all have. What else? And we had talked a bit about One of our concerns was what is the water level of the pond? Is it the Dan Stapleton issue had come up, is it 116.8, is 118.8? I think we've resolved that issue, so we've got to figure out how we're gonna proceed with that, because that has an effect on how much dredge we need to take out. Right, and the question is, do we dredge to 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet? And we need to figure out what makes the most sense. And I think we learned from Ice House Pond that the dredge there, if you look at the aerial view of what's happening there, I think we learned that it was only 4 or 5 feet.
That's
was
what I,
dredged.
right, that's what I understand is that dredging that was done 20+ years ago was only dredged to a depth of 5 feet, and they are having, severe water chestnut reinfestations everywhere.
So I think.
But it
we
wasn't
learned-
deep enough.
Right, yeah, and that's
I
what
think
we
the
learned
minimum
from
is
that.
8 feet.
But yeah, it was the minimum that.
Yeah,
Right,
was to be
yeah,
right,
for the sunlight not to get too activated.
right.
correct. Anything else that I have missed or?
I think just one other thing is that we had talked about doing site visits, and maybe this is something we can talk about in a larger group. I mean, with Milford Pond, which was dredged in 2014, plus or minus. I have not had a chance yet to pull that near map imagery together, but the near map imagery indicates that there's a fairly substantial regrowth. I don't have the original design plans, but we had talked about in the dredging subgroup, maybe doing either a site visit or having somebody from Milford come and talk with us. And I guess we'll keep it at a subgroup
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
stage right now and figure out what we learn. Yeah. So I think that's, I guess the only other thing is that Jeff, Quick from DOC on our subgroup had offered to do some, test pitting to understand what the, depth of loam is there, because the loam would be stripped. It would be used for another use, by the prison, and that would provide a little bit, 6 to 8 inches of additional depth
Right,
that, could accommodate an additional amount of material from
That's great.
the dredging.
Yeah.
because that's a substantial area.
Yeah,
It is.
What did we say it was? How
I
many?
think it was 7.5 acres. 7.5.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
was.
but the other thing, just so everybody understands, that amount of dredge material would not be able to be. It would have to be, several inches below grade of Route 2.
Right.
So that it doesn't impede any, future activities that DOT might undertake with the rotary. Or
Flooded. Is there, with that-
or flooding, like we don't want to be
Right.
flooding Route 2.
that's
Flood the
right.
road,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Listen, they've been flooding us for many years.
Talk to them about that outfall.
It's our turn. Are there any questions?
Well, I'd like to mention an idea that I don't think it's ever come up before, but last week, as part of the process that we're doing with 2210 Main Street, which is the StarMet site
Right,
or nuclear metals. The select board and some other members, including Paul, who happens to also be on that task force, toured that. And we got a look at the remediation that's being done at that site, and they are removing 85,000 cubic yards of material for that site, because basically they're going in and going 10 feet below the slab of the existing buildings there. And the project director who was giving us the briefing was mentioning that when they get done with this, they actually need to refill that back up. And so they will have, the EPA will have to buy fill
Oh my,
from someplace.
we're gonna
to
make
do
cash
that.
on this.
That's right.
So-
That's
So
right.
the DOC site could be dug, excavated out 10 feet. And
Well-
here you go, EPA.
Yeah.
You know, well, the point being,
Yeah.
and
There's a pond.
they're not
Yeah.
allowed, they're not allowed to specifically do construction for us, but if we happen to have a bunch of fill at the right
Yeah.
time for when they're refilling this in,
They would buy it.
they would accept it.
Good.
And so
Right.
That
it's,
might pay for
it,
trucking.
it's an interesting idea because it
Yes,
would
it
be an
is.
opportunity for,
Oh,
you know,
win.
for us to put it someplace that, you know, or someplace else, or have a secondary site.
Will they accept
Right.
ponds?
Well, I
setbacks?
don't have no idea.
Okay,
So-
because they weren't
Yeah.
willing to accept it at an earlier time for a
Right.
different project, but what I was just thinking was that you could, you know, if EOC is on board with this, you could excavate out 10
Yeah.
feet of the fields,
Right,
give them that fill, which
Yeah.
is, you know, good material, and then take sediment from the ponds and put it into that big bathtub.
and there are different areas. The other thing about that site is it's a complicated site. There used to be buildings in some places, there was some dumping going on, so there's different areas that are being excavated and refilled in different ways, so. You know, I don't know that something, but I've just put it out there that it might be interesting to find out more about that as an option for this
Right,
person.
because you never know, depending on what does come out, you know, and if it's a lot of sand, perhaps,
this-
you know, yes, we
yeah.
have
Yeah, they would
the
accept
muck, whatever,
Very
but
possible.
sand,
Right.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's worth a
We balance it
conversation
out.
again, right? Things
They,
change
they
over
said
time.
no, to the material that is organics and sands. And that was the, what's his name, the de minimis guy who's been
Yeah.
working on this project. He's an
Huh.
engineer. They
But he would
would
accept
take, they would take good fill, you know,
Yes, yeah.
but pond sediments is not suitable for a lot of,
For what they do,
no.
yeah, it's just a thought.
Yeah.
There,
It's a good thought.
yeah, there's
Was
a
a good
hill
one.
there.
No, but it's still a good thought because we
Yeah.
could move
Yeah.
some of
You
this.
still maybe can
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
topsoil.
Although trucking
And
is
more,
not.
I would
more,
go down
yeah, of
10
course.
feet,
Yeah.
whatever, I'm just.
Well,
throwing
yeah.
out
It's
the
not the
option.
cheapest, trucking is not the
Creative
cheapest
solution.
solution. We remember that from our
Well,
last bid.
some of the buildings that they're talking about, you know, removing were 4 acres big for building. You know, so we're talking about very large. Like I said, 85,000 cubic yards is what's getting shipped
Wow.
off site.
That's Paul's 100,000 for the good.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Liz.
So I have, one, I don't remember if I mentioned this or if I just mentioned it in my head. I had read something on the mass.gov had like action alerts, and one of the things that I was reading about some of the invasives, and one of the things was the water chestnut. They suggested that if you just dredge, you're likely to get reinfestation if you don't try to seed it with something else. So I'd be curious if, like, as we talk to these places who dredge and have regrowth, if they, cause like perhaps like they just dredged and that's why, but like if they had put something else down, so just like a random
Right.
thought. And then actually, I think you basically answered my other question is, so there's that, like cemetery
Yes.
that's there, so this
Yes.
wouldn't be like,
No.
it's so far below,
No,
right?
yes,
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't affect the cemetery and it couldn't go further than the access road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, I was just trying to like
Yeah,
envision
it has
like
to
how
be
it
at
all,
least
right.
level
It's a
with the
huge
trail.
area.
Right.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, okay.
Right.
okay.
Supposed to be level with the trail, come down, sort of fill in, but it can't go
Mhm.
higher than.
There's a dip there. If you go
Right.
by there, you can see
Yeah.
next to Route 2,
Okay.
it dips down.
That's-
Yeah, and it's, as
Envision.
we said, what, about 7.5 acres?
I think
Something
that's
like
right,
that.
Yeah.
something, that's.
I was thinking 5.5 to 7.5,
Yeah.
but it's somewhere in that.
Yeah.
Was Paul still on the, Paul was on the,
He's not.
no, he's not, okay.
He's
Well,
not.
quick.
But whatever, we'll.
We'll figure it out.
Other questions or comments? Okay, that was great.
Thank you.
So moving on to the next topic. This is our standing item of, right, this is where we are, remember?
Yes, I think we
Topics of-
are.
Remember topics of interest and next steps. So this is our standing agenda item for task force members to raise anything that you want to talk about or anything you've heard or read that you want to share with the group.
We do have a couple that we know about.
Right.
So,
You want
sure, yeah, well, maybe we can just go through these bullets, and then if there are other items that folks want to raise, we can do that as well. So first item, I think, Chris, I'll turn to you about this. or-
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually, I'm going to, I talked to Vicky and I will defer to
This is my
her.
piece.
okay,
To update us on what's going on with the Friends of Warner's Pond and the mitigation of Juro.
Giroux, okay. So as what you called it, roundtables, I think, Mark, there was, I want to just give out, shout out to Alan Cathcart, who did convene, quite a number of groups in town, including Delia, Department of Public Works, Recreation, Friends of Warner's Pond, and Mary Weinberg, all out at Giroux Park. I keep Mary as a separate entity. It was really nice to have a convening like that, because it was basically saying, let us understand what you guys are thinking here. And we have everybody here who could follow up and make things happen. And I think everybody came with the feeling that everyone was gonna work towards making something happen. And so it was very refreshing and really well done. So I do think the roundtables and the convenings are the way to go, because everybody was there. And we were able to ask, is it the 100-foot buffer? Can we do that? Can we move this tree? Can we, can we get the funding? And actually, somebody from Finance Committee just happened to be walking through. And so it was a bigger convening than we even thought could happen. I was kind of there as the pencil for the group. And we walked through the entire park, and we identified areas where we all agreed there would be change. So everyone there said, yes, this zone could have fewer trees and different kind of planting. This area could have a playground, and we agreed that we were gonna go in and, go for CPC funds to put in playground equipment. We had shown ideas of what kind of playground equipment, and everybody was in agreement that, sort of natural, no plastic, and something that felt like it was part of the park originally.
Is that the same playground that he's talking about? that Paul's
Yes,
talking
so
about?
there's real
Okay.
consensus coming together on
Yeah,
all of
okay.
this, but there was other stuff, like, can we get rid of this tall fence? Can we make it rail? And Delia immediately, yes, we can do that. So there was a lot of agreement on things
Is that
that.
the fence that you didn't like when we went on that trail?
Yeah.
On the walk?
Right, from the beginning.
Yes. Subject to NRC approval.
I was just thinking that, yes, that's right, yeah.
I could make a recommendation. I do support that.
The chicken wire one that somebody.
Yes,
put in
yes.
there. Good idea.
And then there was ideas of, where could we add some benches and picnic tables for people, for the elderly, because right now people who have trouble sitting on those stone walls can't really use the park the way we would all like them to use the park. And Mary, God bless her, was talking about, this is an area I would like to sit and write a poem, and this is an area I would like to hang out, but so we were able to identify some important view corridors and moments and areas where we thought families could have a picnic and what that might look like. And so we're gonna finalize this plan. And then I think we have to have a landscape architect make it biddable.
Right.
But at least the scope will be something we've all talked about. There'll be no surprises. And it includes moving trees around and buying fences and buying buying benches and picnic tables. So some things are new, some things are old, and some things are just reconfigured. So that's really,
It's so fantastic.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
fingers crossed that good
Mhm.
feeling that was out there continues forth on.
Yeah,
Control.
it's great.
And the town manager's reporting in the whole construction, who's working on the pavilion is almost done. And, I think they've got a few pavers or something, and the signage has been, so it's really. And I think that in order to enable some of the things that Vicky was just talking about, we kind of need the phase 1 construction project to end so
Right.
that other work can get in place, because obviously it's awkward. It'd be like somebody was renovating your kitchen and you're going in there and starting to change the cabinets before they're done. You
Right.
can't do,
No, it's not.
that doesn't make any real sense. So, that, that project is what it is, but it is approaching closure, and I think that creates the opportunity
Agreed.
for some of this planning to happen.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna add two things if I could. So one is, there was a picnic also that happened at Giroux, even though it's not complete, out on the big lawn. 126 people showed up to this picnic. It was really grassroots. It was not truly advertised.
fun.
It was so much fun. So we had a local Jimmy Two Feathers who lives on the pond, came with his group of African drummers. I wanted to get that right. It was the African drummers. And they did a concert for us, and people learned how to dance African dance, and kids were running around, and it's exactly what you want from a community picnic ground. And so we now know that lawn can easily fit 300 people, because we were not even half full. So there's real opportunity to convene the community at Giroux. So as you know, you
Yeah.
were part of that vision, early on. So that's one. And the second one is that the Giroux were there. Nancy Giroux came, which was lovely. Also, we talked to her, they would like some sort of a plaque or something that acknowledges the history of their family on the site. So they went and looked around town to see what other kinds of plaques there are. And they're like, could we do a rock with a black plaque on it? So I don't know what the process is to.
There's
Probably
a-
similar to the one at Final.
Yeah, there's one right out, there's some in Concord Center, they're all over town, sort of those kind of rocks with those round plaques.
It needs to go before the select board.
Select board, from who does that?
You know,
Ryan, yeah, thank you.
Or we can take that
I
separately, I
think
know that's
those,
not really.
I
under
think those
our
can
purview.
come up and like we approved one recently, there was an Eagle Scout project over near Fairyland. Forget exactly where,
Oh, they did the Eagle Scouts did that boardwalk in between,
no, this was some kind of signage.
So I can take this
Yeah,
up with you
yeah.
separately, I don't want
Christmas
to
Hill.
Yeah,
time away
It
from
was
this
up-
meeting, but.
It can be anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
Anybody can
Okay.
bring
Yeah.
forth a proposal. It
Right.
doesn't have to be,
I see, a group,
no,
right,
I mean, it could be friends of. Or
Oh,
pond,
okay.
or it could be,
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
But it's probably worth it's probably worth an offline conversation, just so.
which we thought was a great
Kick the
sentiment
tires on it
to
a little
have
bit.
that history, because I learned a lot from her about what year her parents moved and how long they lived there, and I think that would be good to have that memorialized on the site too.
They did, agree to a discount sale, I think of $500,000.
Hmm.
The appraised value.
Hmm.
That's very nice gesture.
Right.
Generous.
But at some point, there will be a dedication. So,
Yeah, that's good. Maybe this can go with that.
Yeah.
Moment.
Quick question, the gathering, the design
Yeah.
work sounds great. Is all of that also being presented as the views onto whatever future wetland, water body?
Yeah, it's like views, not of the toilet rooms.
No, no,
Because
no,
some
no,
of it right
no,
now,
but
it's like views in, and this will be views out towards something, it could be anything, yes.
So again, just
Yeah, it is.
hearing next year, somebody's like, we had this whole meeting and talked about views of the pond and now. you're
Oh, yeah,
talking
it's
about-"
not, it's any waterway. So right now, the views are being blocked by a lot of trees, and it's like, what are we looking at here? We created a pavilion that looks at the Bruce Freeman Trail. But is that really? If
How many
there's a,
trees are coming?
well, they're gonna move. None of them are gonna be done.
So the newly planted trees?
Yeah, newly planted trees only, not
That is-
existing grown trees. It's only. It's 110 newly planted trees, but there's
Not
plenty.
all of those are, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say a large majority of those will be transplanted.
Okay.
That's great.
And there's places for them, hiding
Yeah,
parking
we
lots
had one.
on the trail, on the Bruce Freeman Trail. So there's places in Giroux and maybe even in West Concord Center, who knows, but there's places for them in the town. We wouldn't, just remove them.
There's an effort to plant 250 trees for the 250th.
Yeah.
Yep.
But,
You want a couple from the?
well, my wife would know about proposed locations.
Yes,
Where-
we might be able to have them take them from there instead of us paying to remove them.
Great.
Let's talk about that too.
All right, thanks, fantastic update, love to hear this. So next bullet, we have, I think this is for Chris, or Chris and Bill. either one of you? Yeah.
about this than I
So League of Women Voters.
That's League of Women Voters. I didn't have one. Yeah.
You brought me into it.
I did, actually I did. I had a text message from Diane Proctor from the League of Women Voters, and she said their opening meeting is coming up on September 24th. And they want to have a panel about all the things that have been happening in Concord over the summer, and what are the challenges coming forth. And they already invited, I think, Mary Hartman's coming from the board, and someone's coming from finance, and someone's coming from education. And they asked if we would attend the panel. And he said, just gonna be questions and answers. So I said, we have to check in first with the task force, but if you say it's okay, then we'd be happy to attend.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
okay,
Any folks are good with this? Yeah, any concern? No? Okay.
Good.
Great.
Okay, we're in.
Good,
We're in.
go for it, go for it.
I'm blessed.
Go forth and panel.
Right.
yeah, that's right.
Okay, so next item, so we, per your request, did some outreach, to Joe Gould and some others on dam removal site visit options. And we heard back from Joe, and he offered us some recommendations. He said there are some very easy, it's easy to access and park, and he recommended dam removal in Chicopee, so the Abbey Brook, Norwood, Chapel Brook, Pepperell, Sucker Brook. He didn't initially suggest Acton, but we know that that had come up. And so we followed up with him about that, and he said he could connect us to the person who would help us arrange that if we wanted to for the River Street Dam. And then also separately, we connected with a representative in Plymouth on tour opportunities. And there's both dam removal in Plymouth, several dams, and dredging along Town Brook. So it's an opportunity to kind of see various approaches. So I guess our question to you is sort of what makes sense? I mean, I think there are a lot of different options. We don't know that there's an easy way to choose among them. One thing we could do is just, you know, provide information of how to access each of these. We could organize specific tours and have a date if folks want to join. I think the question is, what do you want our next step on these site visit options to be?
I think that people should take a look first at some
Yeah.
of these online and see, you know, if there's any interest, does it make sense? Yes or no? And then
Yeah.
kind of go from there.
Come back next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
David has a question.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
Yeah, this is relating back to the point we got a request to come and brief the League of Women Voters, and we promptly agreed and followed through on it. We do still have an outstanding request from the Girl Scouts as well, if you recall back to May timeframe, which we haven't fulfilled on.
Can we do that?
Sure.
I mean, I'm happy to talk to them. I'm a Girl Scout troop leader, so I'm happy to, if you guys are comfortable with it, I'm happy to email Meredith and Emily and say, at our next service unit meeting, I'm happy to talk to you guys.
How does that sound,
That-
David?
Okay, and I have to sign off now because I gotta go to now the Scout House Board meeting. So
Sorry.
thank you for a board-filled Tuesday. Take care.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Girl Scouts are gonna be-
And it sounds like general assent for
Yes.
Liz to
Yeah,
do that.
sure,
That's
it'd be great.
fantastic,
That'd be
Liz.
fantastic.
Thank you. And so,
Thank you, Liz.
yeah, great. So yeah, we'll send out this list, and I think we'll
Yeah.
request you for some homework to take a look and come back, and we'll talk about, you know, what the interest is, and maybe we do you know, task force visit, or maybe we, you know,
Individuals
go, right? I think we
And-
can.
I'd also be interested in hearing from people in those towns about, you know, what they learned, like lessons learned.
Yeah,
We
Yeah,
removed the dam and I wish we had fill in the blank.
yeah.
yeah.
Like, I wish
So-
we'd known,
Yeah,
or I
yeah.
wish we had done this differently. I wish we'd dredged the channel, you know, whatever it is, like, it would be, because we're gonna go look at it and there won't be a dam. I'm
Right,
not sure if I can understand how that went. Was it a great experience?
right.
Yeah. I
Whereas
know
I'd
that
like
some
to
of
hear
these-
from them about how it really went.
Yeah, some of these have little videos, but I mean, it's still not the same, you know, seeing it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
at least it'll give a first go at
Sure.
what it's all about.
I think it's important that we meet with somebody who
Yeah.
has knowledge about it.
Yeah.
'Cause I think
I
it's
agree.
just one thing to go and see it, but I think we'll
Mhm.
get a lot more information
Yeah,
about,
no, it's a good.
Oh.
you know, lessons learned and,
Uh-huh.
you know, we can, yeah. I think
So it
it's-
sounds
Let's
like,
do it
in
better. Let's learn
addition
their
to
lessons.
sharing this list, sort of a homework for the planning team is just, I mean, we know we have a contact in Plymouth who's been responsive, right? And just check in if that's also the case with some of these other options.
Right.
Right,
If they have any artifacts that we could read or watch
Yeah.
or whatever,
Mhm.
that'd be just great to distribute.
Yeah.
So I think.
Mhm.
It's also the reason why they took those. dams down.
Yes.
It's so extremely-
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
It was collapsing, then they had no
Mhm.
choice.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
versus
Right.
it was a planned community.
Or now I don't know if you'd ever
process.
also know, like, was it a 20-foot high dam that was collapsing? Or was it a 5-foot high dam that wasn't collapsing? And so you know, it's hard to know, right, by just looking at the end condition.
Yeah. yeah,
Let's hear
Right.
more.
this is all very helpful. So we'll take all of this and do some outreach and get back to you
Okay.
with some updates. So next bullet, so hopefully folks saw this. We sent around a very extensive written public comment from Dan Stapleton, member of the community who really just kind of went above and beyond in collecting publicly available information. We've already heard reference to some of the questions raised in that report around elevation levels. From that comment, I should say, on elevation levels. So as you may have seen in the email, our suggestion was, take a look. This is a really extensive piece of work. It might focus in on any areas relevant to your specific work groups and see what's in there and if it's helpful and if it raises any questions. We just thought, given how extensive that comment is, it might be worth checking in and seeing if there's an interest in, doing more with that or a need to do more with that folks feel strongly about and want to offer some process recommendations to our planning team around.
Right.
So,
Sure.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
it was extraordinary.
Mhm.
He took the
Yeah.
time as a citizen to pull that together. It was amazing. As much work as we've all done on the committee, he did on his own. I did hear, I think you, in the comments that there was disagreement on some of the conclusions. I'd love to know what your disagreements are so that we can learn from that. I think it's.
I haven't even gone through all of it.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
I think it's important for us to learn.
I would say
from it, 'cause
the
otherwise we're
one
reading.
thing that I think, and a lot of this information is gonna be provided in the basis of design report. Which I think I would love Dan to take a look at, but the amount of wetlands that are remaining at the end of the day. I think is different, in my understanding than it is, in Dan's.
So that's the primary issue that you have with this.
As I said, I have not gone
Okay.
through the whole thing, but that jumped out at me.
Yeah, and I would just recognize that he's been a regular participant in the subgroup that I'm on, and we really appreciate it. He listens carefully and has provided us with a lot of impact. So I found that document, especially the first, 8 pages of a summary of it, really useful. And, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, do, because I think there is something for almost every group in there.
Yeah.
And it's really quite a piece of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, similarly impressed with Dan's efforts. The biggest problem with the assertion of the need for a wetlands impact study. I mean, it sort of says in the dam removal scenario that would be at the cost of wetlands loss, and that would be a huge ecological impact. And I'll just point out that from DER, NOAA, Division of Marine Fisheries, US Fish and Wildlife Service, DEP, all of our state and federal environmental agencies are advocating for dam removal, investing in dam removal, prioritizing dam removal. We asked Joe Gould, why is DER charged with restoration of wildlife habitat statewide, focused on salt marshes, cranberry bogs, and dam removals? Why those 3 things? And those are the highest impact. Those are the greatest benefits we can bring to our environment. And just a final point that right now, Mass Wildlife is charged with and working on developing biodiversity goals for the state in response to an executive order from Governor Healy, which is fantastic. And one of their top priorities is remove 300 dams by 2030. So the idea that the environmental thing to do is leave the dam to retain these historically anomalous edge wetlands, I think is not a strong argument.
I mean, that's a good point, I think, but in looking at, I think one of the major differences that I see is that if you look at the dams that you listed tonight, or the dam removal sites, and if you look at what Joe has said to us, is that all of those dams are in dire need of repair. And so they're the priorities as well. And, the Warner's Pond Dam is not a priority, because it's a relatively new dam. So I think that's just something we need to keep in mind as we think about everything. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's what I'm hearing from these different agencies as you read through, that it's mainly that the dams are in dire need of repair or removal.
I think that's where interests align. But here, we're all together because Warner's Pond is suffering and needs investment.
Right.
So what's the
Right,
right
what is the
investment?
best, right, course of action?
Any other thoughts about the Dan Stapleton comment? If there's more dedicated time we need on this, or again, if this is something that we really encourage work groups to take a look at and consider. In your
I think
deliberations.
everyone's gotta read it. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
it's so much work. It's some things that, questions that we keep asking.
Mhm.
He does try to answer, or whether we can agree with it. But I'd like to hear, if you don't agree with it, I'd like to hear why, because we haven't heard the detailed answers, like
Yeah.
what he's put into that report. Honestly, there's a lot of science that he puts together there, so it'd be good to hear some of those details.
Yeah, I think our charge is to grapple with those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
We asked a lot of questions, we've incorporated a lot of the questions that, that Liz laid out, you know,
Mhm.
our group. We also pulled together the task force with a deadline, and I think the idea, and Dan does say at one point, why are we rushing? I think you all know better than I do that this rush has been 10 years thinking about, you know, how to grapple with the issues at Lawyers Pond. So there's a little bit of 300 pages of very thoughtful spaghetti thrown at the wall. It will never take that apart by December.
Mhm.
So not to say Dan doesn't raise some good issues. I think our group is asking some of those same questions. But I don't think many of us are gonna read 350
All of it,
pages.
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that can't be
Mhm.
prerequisite to move forward.
I'm just recommending it.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we've heard the suggestions and kind of
But-
the counterpoint.
But I just want to put out there, this hasn't been grappled for 10 years. For 9 years, we had an answer. For 1.5 years, we've been grappling with dam removal. It's, I think it's slightly different. The way I would put that is the last 1.5 years, we've been grappling with this discussion.
Yeah.
For 9 years, we had an answer that we thought we knew. We had a path that the
And-
town liked.
And just to reiterate, I know we've touched on this in past meetings, but to the extent that there's a sense that this process, when our task force is being rushed, I think we want to be clear. We're not on a timeline,
Yeah.
right? We're committed to giving this deliberation the time that it needs, right? All right, great. Thank you all for that. Glad we put that on a table and had a chance to touch base on it. Last item, we wanted to talk a little bit about timing, and location of meetings. So unfortunately, Harvey Wheeler, is booked, Celia, correct me if I'm wrong, basically until 5:30.
Right, so the daycare, or I think it's the daycare is in the main room until 5 o'clock. And
Mhm.
so, I think if we were going to use, you know, that room, you know, and if we have the subgroups breaking out, we'd want all 3 rooms.
Yeah,
Um,
we need setup,
we would
yeah.
want to
Yeah.
start the meetings at 6.
Yeah.
Six and
Yeah,
nods.
Liz likes it, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the question, is
Yep.
would you rather, gosh. Would you rather
Yeah.
I think, you know, we can keep alternating as one option, or we can just say, we want Harvey Wheeler, we like that, it's more
Not
convenient for a lot of us.
It's not available all times. So
Okay.
even for the next, I know that there are 2 meetings that it did not work, so we would
Okay.
have to.
But
At
when
least.
available, use Harvey Wheeler, but start at 6, right? And then, otherwise, we can use this and keep the regular time.
Yeah, I like that idea. I'm not sure other people feel
Mhm.
about that. 6.
I just get here early, take a longer nap.
For those of us who've been leaving work
Right.
early and rushing to get here, it'd be nice.
Yeah.
Just to know that
I
it
was on my
would be
drive.
8:45 now, if we were at Harvey Wheeler, right? If we were doing that.
Yeah.
It'd be like, we'd be starting an hour later, it'd be 8:45 now, we're gonna end it, you know, soon, right? So. As long as that's okay with folks, I think we're happy to.
I
do
think
it.
we always target 8:30, but 2.5 hours, but we know.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
that's
if we
true.
go to 9.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right, that's right.
Okay, so I think, you know, not everyone is here, so I think it's worth
Just
just,
how we-
we can roll on this and double check,
Yeah.
right? And if anyone is like, there's a large group that says, no, I just cannot make that, right? I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
we'll come back to you all.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think we hear the consensus in the room for this group at least.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great, so
Well,
we
we're
are,
hearing that the next meeting is gonna be here anyway, you just.
oh yeah, Julie, can you confirm that? Is the next meeting gonna be, is Harvey Wheeler available for the next meeting?
I will confirm, but I believe it is not.
It is
Okay.
not, so we'll be here then.
So we'll
And
be
It is the
here
next-
So we start 5:30 this one and then just probably really.
26th, yeah.
So start, I mean, it's up to you guys, what time you
Straight
would.
away.
I feel like,
Do we want to just change the start date to 6
Go ahead.
and make it consistent?
yeah, I
or-
feel like consistency is easy.
I don't care.
I think
As long as I-
consistency makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay,
Okay.
6.
So
Yeah,
6,
6.
okay,
I'll just confirm that with the fisheries.
Person.
okay,
Person,
yeah, okay.
but I
Okay.
think,
Here,
Okay.
next meeting here,
Here,
6
6 p.m.
o'clock, unless,
Sounds good.
unless Steve can't make it, in which case, we'll.
Well, we can
We'll-
go 5,
we'll-
we
yeah,
can
we'll
do
do
5,
five.
if we
So
have-
we'll
Make an
confirm that
exception.
with you.
We could make an exception.
I have a challenge on that day anyway, that starts at 6, so.
Oh, it
So
starts.
I was
no
gonna,
matter what.
give this an hour.
so can we just stick with 5, one more?
One more.
so-
One more 5 and then we'll make a
And then
change.
make it
Okay.
6.
Okay,
That makes
okay.
sense.
That way we get
Yeah.
hours.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Good.
good, look at that, it's
Yeah.
on the slide, it's 5 o'clock, so we're not.
There it is, there it is.
Okay,
Alright, and I personally find the acoustics in this room a little bit easier to work with. I recognize that when we maybe get a little further in our process and start saying, this is what we're recommending, we may get enough attention that the bigger room is advantageous, but that's just my reaction to it. in general.
At some point I had suggested, Harvey Willard just for West Concord.
Mm.
Proximity, whatever, but it is a challenging room. And this room is set up in a different way somehow tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, no, we also put the tables closer. Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Way better.
so this feels,
Right,
Bert,
this
that was
feels
Bert,
better.
thank you.
And if it
Good
makes
job.
sense,
Way to go, Bert.
I'll vote for West Concord. I'm willing to come all the way over here.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
the
it
only
makes more
issue is
sense.
we don't have public here today, so
Yeah.
you and I aren't.
Yeah.
in the
I
best
will have it
way.
back to the.
Yeah.
That's not in the best position
Yeah,
for
my-
public.
yeah,
discussion.
Yeah.
very inconvenient, yeah, but
Be
It's
great
better
if
for the
there was a
sound, for sure.
Second screen somewhere, but.
But just to be clear, we're saying we want to do Harvey Wheeler when it's available, but yes.
do we?
But not the
Is
next
that-
meeting, yeah.
Not the next meeting, but is that still the case, or are we
I-
flip flopping on that and say we wanna keep, keep alternating?
I was
Yeah.
hearing.
I was
Yeah.
expressing a
Opinions.
preference. I understand that sometimes we may need, but I personally find this room more conducive and I think this was a very productive meeting, so, yeah,
Mm.
I'm just reacting to that. I think
Yeah.
somehow or another, we seem to get a little bit more done in here.
Yeah, I just
Mhm.
want to add, because I like tonight too, we're down 4 people.
Yeah,
And no
that's true.
public,
Yeah.
so if we added 4 more people
Yeah.
to this table and
That's the
public, I
challenge,
don't know
yeah.
how that would feel, but I thought this was easy tonight.
Mhm.
What are the,
So I think we're debating between
Here we go.
either Harvey Wheeler, whenever we can, the exception being when it's not available, we come here, or continuing the practice that we've had so far of, like more or less alternating, right? Either way, we're gonna eventually shift.
and the issue with Harvey Wheeler also is that there is
Yeah, it's on the
There's the
TV.
remote.
Yeah,
problem. There is an audio.
Give it a remote.
Okay.
But could we set up the Harvey Wheeler table close? Because when
Right.
we go to Harvey Wheeler, we like spread out.
Right.
So could we set up?
Good
well,
golly.
we're gonna try that,
Like that.
yeah.
We're gonna try
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
the size of the room, you know, the
Yeah,
acoustics
it makes it-
bouncing around the room
makes it-
do make it more difficult.
Yeah.
On audio for people that are not in.
Right,
What about that smaller room that we did the other day? Was that still hard for
With
audio?
those, with those
People
big
didn't like those
columns.
yeah. it was tricky.
Okay,
So there's no perfect, but.
yeah.
you know,
Alright, so I mean, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I'm hearing enough interest in some meetings continuing to be here, that do we? You co-chairs, I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely,
you know what,
yeah.
I think we should ask a question.
Ask in the survey, yeah,
And
Yeah.
just see what people.
Yeah.
come back
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
yeah. Great.
If we put walls at the pavilion at Giroux.
I was gonna say, we should meet out there once the pavilion.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah, we should
I'll,
do
uh,
it soon then.
Before it gets
Right.
chilly.
Yeah.
Or,
So
Bring your
we'll
own
pull
chair.
on this, we'll put some, some
Yeah.
concrete, discrete options and let you all
Okay.
vote and see where it comes out. Next meeting that will be here,
At 5
at
o'clock.
5 o'clock on September 26th. I do just want to check in, and I think work groups can follow up with us by email if you want to consult first. Is there any work group that feels confident that they want to offer a proposal September 26th? And if so, we should plan around that.
Would
do you
we
think?
just, would we just go to a meeting to?
We need to frame something.
It's the 2 of us.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
never-
we do.
I think we need to at least committees.
I think, because David had to leave, we'll get back to you, but we might be ready.
We might be
Okay.
ready, yeah. We're close. We're meeting tomorrow.
December
Then-
23rd is the next one.
Then the
Alright.
Thursday.
challenge that I would have is that I will need to leave.
Thursday.
Yeah, the one on the 26th.
Oh, the 26th. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I didn't get any real questions. I didn't get the hard
Yeah,
ones.
that's right. That's right. So no.
So, we are at the end of our task force portion of the meeting. We'll send around this feedback form with some of these questions to all, including on locations, other feedback on the meeting. But we do have
Oh,
another,
what-
yeah,
I'll
oh,
just-
Julie, please, yeah,
just
go ahead.
Have one
Yep.
question for the
Mhm.
group. So I think, as we're looking at the dam removal 30% design, those plans came out recently, they were distributed, and we're waiting for the final comments on the basis of design report. The engineers had in their contract a task to prepare an engineer's opinion of probable cost, which is for the dam removal construction, as well as all the, permitting that would have to occur, and the, final engineering design and, bid administration and everything else. But we have, so what I want to ask the group is that we have these 30% dam removal designs, and we've heard that there's some skepticism about the consultant's ability to generate an opinion of probable cost on the construction aspects of dam removal. So I would like to get, confirmation from this group that if we go with a contractor, we'll put this out for, small RFQ to see if anybody from a contractor side of things is willing to provide us with that cost of dam removal, but we wouldn't get the updated, costs on, the engineering and the permitting and the rest of it. We're just gonna get the number for dam removal and then any adaptive management that we would have to do to, think about, how do we manage invasive species and that sort of a thing. Is the group comfortable with that approach, so that we take those 30% design plans, rather than have EA provide an opinion of probable cost, we then get costs, we get cost estimates from
Other firms.
from
So-
a contractor versus
A
an
contractor,
engineer.
right? So, and my sense would be that we will probably end up doing the same thing for the dredging group too, right?
Yeah,
Getting the same kind of a cost estimate from
That-
them.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. That
But
sounds-
isn't EA doing the design? Wouldn't they know the cost of their design to finish up the design? for
It's
that
not to
project?
finish it, right, they would, so I'm asking about the dam removal construction. Having that go out to a contractor.
Right, but you were saying then we wouldn't be able to get the cost of the engineering, but if they
Well,
are
not
doing
at this
engineering,
moment.
they could tell us what they would charge us, to finish the engineering, 70%, right? The other 70%.
They could, they
Or they
could,
should just
we're
tell
we're
us what their
taking that out of
proposal
their
is.
scope.
Right, but they could tell us what it would cost, and we'd know like,
I
okay, now
see.
here's the construction cost, here's the engineering cost. It would give us the total cost.
Could a construction company give us actually a true cost without all the engineering? Is another question.
Well,
They have
it's a
30%, they do it based on
It's
the 30%.
skeletal,
Right.
it is not 100%.
We do
Right.
cost estimating all the time based on
I've done it too,
25%
I've done it too, and I've
documents
looked at sort of
30%
25%,
documents.
it's like when you look at it.
Yeah.
You still, there's a
Yeah,
good
you
side,
put in a
there's still a
contingency.
margin, there's a
Well, you Put
margin.
in a contingency at that point, but at least you know if it's 1 million or 5 million or 10 million,
Yeah.
right? You know
Yeah,
kind
for
of
this year.
where you are, yeah.
So Delia, for purposes of our conversation today, you are seeking task force approval to basically take this out of EA's scope and then then in the future, kind of put out to bid a cost analysis from a construction firm. Is that
Correct.
right? So
But-
what you need now is taking it out of EA's scope.
But I'd
Yeah.
also like them to tell us what they are going to charge us to finish the engineering.
So are you asking about the actual completion of the design?
That's right.
And
Because they don't have to pay for that, that's a
We do have to pay
proposal.
for it.
We have, no, we have to pay for the engineering, but they could tell us what it costs.
That's
That's a proposal.
No, it's in their scope now, but I'm saying it's coming out. So that we can,
So how much are we taking out? Is it 100,000, 700,000? What do we
It's-
have in there for that?
I think their cost estimate for that task, and I would have to double check, is on the order of $5,000.
5,000 to finish from 30% to a final bid package.
No.
Construction cost.
Yeah, just
No, no,
get a
no.
cost estimate.
We're saying two different things.
Yeah.
One is we need a cost estimate for construction of, to remove the dam.
We don't know that.
No, I know, we need that. We're saying we need that.
Yeah.
Right? We need a cost estimate from someone
Mhm.
to remove the dam. But we also need an understanding of what it's gonna cost us to finish the bid documents.
And we have conceptual numbers
Okay.
of that in the 2023 alternatives analysis report. They're conceptual, you
So
know, but it's a
we'll-
ballpark.
So
It's
we
not-
would add that, so we would add that to this to say, in order to finish, to remove the
okay,
dam,
so-
you'd have to pay for engineering plus construction and it equals this,
Yeah.
right?
And
Is
the
that-
permitting,
am I
something
getting
that
it? Okay,
is
thanks.
fairly, we would, because you said the other thing we include in there is the permitting.
Mhm.
That's something we can probably get a handle of ourselves, right?
I mean, I would look at the conceptual, I would look at the alternative.
Oh, that also has the.
They have
okay,
more now.
Yeah.
Have that all in there.
Okay.
So again, the question for the task force is, leaving aside the question of the kind of engineering design costs, which it seems like we know that we need those figures, right? An estimate of those figures and, feel
We have
guessing there,
that.
we have that, right? For the construction cost estimate, does this group support removing that from EA's scope and then getting a construction firm to provide us with that information, given what Julia suggests she's been hearing is lack of trust around EA to do that effectively, given expertise, what have you, right? Is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard skepticism, but I think it's also, I think it's a better number coming from a contractor.
Mhm.
They're,
Mhm,
you know,
Yeah.
they know what their costs are going to be, and
mhm.
an engineer is, I mean, I think they're, they issue them all the time,
Yeah, yeah.
So I think they can do it, but I
Mhm.
think a better number would come from the contractor.
So, reactions?
I think it makes sense.
I think it makes sense, because I know where the skepticism came up when we were talking about the dredging, it was the cost of moving the material.
Yep.
was Way off from what they did to
Right.
what actually a contractor did. And I remember that really very clearly, that we were all like, well, why would an engineering firm tell a contractor how much things cost, when a contractor can tell
Yeah.
what it's gonna cost?
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
So I would support pulling it out
Yeah.
personally,
Steve
but I
nods
don't
around.
vote, but I don't vote. But I would
You- you
support
can
that, but I
influence
would
votes.
support that.
That's right, that's right.
Is it something where we need an official vote, or are we?
I just wanted to be sure that everybody was
Yeah.
of the same mind.
We're of the same
We're
mind.
not going to be surprised,
Yeah,
with not getting the engineer's opinion from EA, but to have it from.
No, and I would anticipate we're gonna do the same thing for dredging at some point too.
That's right.
yeah.
All right.
Liz, go ahead.
I feel
Yeah.
that doesn't cause a conflict of interest down the road, does it? I feel like I remember a brief discussion around this, but I
Yeah.
couldn't really remember.
So that is, we'll see what comes back on the RFQ. I'm gonna put it out to 3 contractors, and, I had understood that there was a potential conflict, that they don't want to share information on a project that they might bid on, because they're sort of playing their hands and making it publicly knowledgeable, but I think we're gonna give it a shot.
What is the difference between doing that and a cost estimator?
So we haven't really been able to find like a cost estimating firm that does dredging.
So I have a friend of
Estimating
mine
for
from
dredging.
Niche Engineering. They said they would go, I asked them, what would you do in this situation? They said they would go to Childs Engineering to ask them the question for dredging costs.
Who are they?
So they're an engineering firm who they use for dredging projects.
Okay, but EA does engineering.
No, I know, but there's this
So
skepticism
I
around
feel like
EA.
But it's just, it's for dredging, it's, I guess, more about the dredging, like, we're looking at dredging. Right, she's saying that this was a recommendation to our committee that
That's right.
child
Yeah, well, yeah.
is a
yeah.
place we
Cost-
can
and the
look,
cost
there's a place we can look.
But what about, so if it's not a question of
Ooh.
concern with EA doing estimating, it was just on that particular bid item,
Right.
then maybe it stays with EA
I don't think so. I think there's skepticism all around
with.
EA and their.
On the cost,
and-
on the cost portion.
And how they, what their interests are.
And what their interests, what do you mean by that?
It's what I'm hearing from the
Right,
community.
but
So
I'm
I'd
just
rather
asking if
keep
you
it-
can elaborate what that.
It's that
means.
we haven't gotten straight information from EA. It's been very much all of a sudden this 360 to dam removal, all of a sudden dredging costs more than it did. It wasn't handled very well. And so it's like, do we really need to go back to that? Or can we have a fresh take and a fresh look where everybody can be like, oh, okay. It confirms everything EA has said, or actually look at that. It's a fresh look at this and we have a different number.
So
think it
to me,
really
Right, I
that's-
think, and
well-
to be clear, I think, Vicky, you're just saying this is the perception
That's right.
that you're hearing, right?
Yeah,
You're
and it
not-
behooves us, I think, to be a little fresh with this information.
And you already said, so let's just do what you suggested. You suggested going and let's just go ahead and do that.
with the contract.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with contract.
just do it the way you're proposing.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Reaching out to the contractor would give us more real numbers.
Exactly,
Right.
absolutely. So go to the
And if
contract.
it doesn't work, we can.
Then we'll-
revisit it.
then we'll-
Come back.
Yeah.
And if it's all over, if it's like
Yeah.
so outrageous, you can actually, you can put it out again if you had to,
Right,
in all honesty.
Right.
Did 3 different ones.
Okay, so I do think we have one more. Oh, is there a hand? Okay,
Public comment.
all right,
Or
good.
public comment.
We do need to get to public comment.
right.
Okay, so, okay.
Anything else?
I think we
Public
are there
All right.
unless so someone else wants to
Nope.
keep us after 8 o'clock.
No,
pressure.
so again,
Too late.
that's true. Okay, so again, it's a time for public comments and the same ground rules, be respectful, avoid public attacks, personal attacks, and keep the comments to no more than 2 minutes. So open it up to public comments. Anyone? Delia, do you see anyone on your,
Yeah,
Oh,
Dan
there-
Stapleton
there it
does.
is.
Yeah, there he is.
Dan?
Hello, Dave.
Yeah, I can't resist, sorry.
2 minutes, Dan.
Yeah, no, it'll be brief. So, if you were to take a walk around Warner's Pond today, walk by the dam, you'd see the water up around elevation 119. It's what the dam normal pool elevation is. And if you kept walking on the rail trail and walked around the MCI fields over to Fort Pond Brook, you'd be standing there at the stream bank at about elevation 120, looking down at the water, and you're going to see about 2-3 feet deep. It looks pretty full. If you then, backtracked and walked to Neshoba Brook downstream of the dam, you'd see it's almost dry. It's got about 2 or 3 inches of water in it. So my point is that the dam has an effect on the hydrology and hydraulics. And one of the reasons that I put the effort into looking into the background information was really because I guess this task force has gone so far and put so much effort without having answers to some of the most fundamental questions. And that's really what I was trying to get at. I wasn't advocating for one alternative or another. And I certainly, I wasn't trying to throw spaghetti on the wall. I just want to be clear on that. But I felt like, just asking basic questions without providing the rationale for that was kind of weak. So I wanted to, that's why there was 300 pages there. But I will acknowledge that we do have this design report coming, so I want to, not really have any more comment until it's made public and can be looked at. But just as a member of the public, I do find it kind of frustrating. Like, we've spent over an hour today on the dam removal alternative and the dam removal subcommittee. And those individuals on that subcommittee do not know what the channel depth will be, what the channel geometry will be, what the water elevation in the pond will be, what wetlands will exist there after the pond, after the dam would be removed. So I'm not advocating for one alternative over another. I'm just saying these are basic questions to be answered. And that's really all I was trying to get at. So, we'll see what comes down the pike, but anyway, I'll leave it
All right,
there.
thank you.
Good reminder.
Yeah, those are good points.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Thank you, Dan. Thank you for your comments. And I guess that's it. So I'll turn it
Adjourn
over.
us. Yeah, Chris.
Chris,
Okay.
finish
Take us
it?
home.
Yeah.
Okay, I assume that there's no other issues, questions, comments, then with no further business in front of this task force, we will close.